start, again, if everybody could mute themselves, I can do it, but I'd prefer if you do it yourself. I need to begin with this. As chair of the House Public Works and Highways Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67 and the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This is a committee orientation meeting. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform. And the public has access to listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by the Zoom platform or by telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar in the General Court website. The notice for this meeting complies with House rules and RSA 91A. Anyone who has a problem accessing the meeting should call 271-3600 or email hcs@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, this meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. I want to introduce the staff that are in the meeting with us and assisting, and that is Brad Greenland, our committee researcher. Brad is on, and he's going to be an important part of our committee going forward. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let us start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. This is in accordance with House rules that the clerk has to keep a record of who is there. When each member states they're present, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. I would ask our clerk, Representative Mills, to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think everybody can hear me. We'll start. Chairman John Graham is here.
Vice President, I'm alone except for my dog, which I may have to let out at some point.
Vice Chairman Mark McConkey.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I am present and I am here by myself. Presently, dogs and cats will pass through.
Thank you. The clerk, David Mills, is here. I am also alone. My wife's at another floor of the house with our cats. Representative Samaro.
Yes, I'm here, and I'm alone, but my wife may come in and out, not sure.
Thank you. Representative Phidolfi. Representative Phidolfi.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's that little microphone, I guess. Anyway, I'm here. My wife is in the house somewhere. She'll be wandering in and out.
Thank you. Also, as soon as this is our first time calling the roll, please don't hesitate to correct me if I get your name wrong. I've got to do this for the rest of the next 2 years. So, Representative Newton. Representative Clifford Newton. Okay. Representative Blasic.
Clifford, unmute yourself.
I can see that Clifford Newton is here, but
yeah,
oh, there we go.
Yeah, it took a while to unmute. Yes, I am here. My wife is currently on the treadmill. She'll be wandering in and out, but she knows I'm in a meeting, so she won't be bothering us.
Thank you. Representative Melissa Blasic.
here, and I'm alone. My family's upstairs.
Representative Boards.
Greg,
Representative Mike Board.
can you stay out here for like 2 minutes? I just have to say I'm here and then I'm shutting it down.
Representative Mike Boards. Okay, let's move on. Representative Kaczynski.
Yes, I'm here, and my wife is in another part of the house on a Zoom meeting herself.
Thank you. Representative Kalansky. Representative Ben Kalansky. Representative Thompson.
I am here. I am alone in the room. Oh, however, my wife is in the house.
Thank you, sir. Representative Van de Castille.
Good morning. I am here.
Thank you. Representative Clutier.
Good morning. I'm Representative John Clutier. I'm alone in my bedroom. My brother, who lives with me, is in another part of the house.
Thank you. Representative Edgar.
Present. I'm alone in the room, but my wife's in the house. So is CB.
Representative Ebel.
Good morning. I'm home alone in New London.
Representative Jack.
I'm here. I'm alone in Nashua.
Representative Abbott.
Here, and I'm alone in Hinsdale.
Representative Faulkner.
Here in Swansea, my wife is in the other room.
Representative Newman.
Yes, I'm here. I'm alone in the house right now. My husband might come into the house at some point, but I'm here. Thank you.
Representative Eaton. Representative Daniel Eaton. Representative Peterson.
Michael Peterson, here and alone.
Thank you. Representative Query.
Hi, Representative Query, here alone other than my dog.
Representative Bunker.
Present in Exeter. I'm alone currently, but my wife might pass through from time to time later on.
All right, and once again, I'm going to go through the three that did not respond in case they're on now. Representative Mike Boards. Representative Ben Kalansky. Representative Dan Eaton. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have 20 of our 23 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We are going to spend a couple of hours today, as I told you in the email, to go over both some of the ground rules and what the committee does, as well as get to know each other, hopefully a little bit. It's not the same as doing it in person, but it's a start. And then we will hear from the Legislative Budget Office on the capital budget process, which is our biggest item in front of us this coming next 3 or 4 months. And also a quick brief from the treasurer on the status of our bonds and borrowing capability within the state. But to start, I'd like everybody in the same order that we were called, because normally I'd go around the table. That's a little harder without a table. To introduce themselves, please take about 3 minutes or so, just to let everybody know who you are. And we can start putting faces to names. And there's 7 or 8 new members of the committee, so it'll be good to do this. I will start. I'm obviously the chair, appointed by the speaker, and I live in Bedford. I grew up in Massachusetts, went to Boston University, and then spent about 21 years in the Army, traveling around the world and go to all kinds of fun places. And once I returned to the States, Knew I wasn't going to live in the Commonwealth. So I found a nice place here in Bedford and got asked by one of my neighbors to run for the State House. And I ran in 2000. And other than one term, I've been here ever since. And this is my 10th term and 10th term on the Public Works Committee. I've also been the Deputy Majority Leader, Republican Whip. I served on the Ethics Committees for 2 years. So I kind of know what we're doing here. And I appreciate all of those who came back on the committee to help leaven the experience that we have, because it's always a challenge, the first bill with the capital budget. And now Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark McConkey, I live in Freedom. I spent my youth in Massachusetts, went to college, Springfield College. I've been in New Hampshire for 30 plus years. I have served 7 terms, beginning my 8th term. Like John, I've spent all of my time here on Public Works. I've been a chairman, I've been a vice chairman. I am, the thing that pleases me most about being part of this committee is that we have not looked at individuals as party. We work cohesively. We do everything we can to pass everything out with a majority, and many times unanimously. And so I look forward to being with you. I know more Democrats on this committee than Republicans, and we have a great wealth of knowledge between us. I'm here to help anyone at any time. It's the first time that I've ever served that we're sitting with 3 chairmen and 3 vice chairmen of this committee, and an awful lot of knowledge going forward. So a little background about myself. I served as a zoning chairman in OSFI for 15 years. I've been a member of the Lakes Region Planning Commission on the executive board. 15 years. I like to do things for a long period of time. And I'm here and available in whatever I can do to either assist my chairman or any of you. Please call on me. Thank you.
Representative Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I go on to my little spiel, I just wanted to know whether you've got the list in front of you to call people in the order you would like, or you want me to do that?
Oh, I'll let you do that, David.
Oh, well, okay, only because I figured not everybody knows what order they were called in, and I'm sure they won't remember it. So anyway, I'm David Mills. I'm in my 5th term here. Also, like our previous 2 speakers, all on the Public Works. I've been the vice chair, and this will be my 2nd time being the clerk. I'm a actual Chicago boy, born and raised, but I had the pleasure of working for Continental Airlines as their general manager for 20 years. And this was one of the places in Boston I was assigned to manage. And I couldn't get New Hampshire out of my blood, so I came back and retired here. I'm a veteran of the Air Force. I served in Vietnam. I guess I mentioned I worked for Continental Airlines and retired. Once I came to Derry, I got active in politics. I was the East Derry Fire Commissioner. I've been a town councilor. I've been on the zoning board. I'm currently on the housing authority here in Derry. And as echoed before by our previous 2 members, I can't think of I can't think of a better committee I'd rather be on than Public Works. We're grounded in getting things done. We take care of the state's infrastructure and a capital budget. And very rarely, very, very rarely does partisan politics ever come into anything that we do here. So I'm looking forward to another great 2 years. Thank you. And up after me is Representative Paul Samaro.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Paul, and I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. At 17 years old, I moved to New Hampshire, and I've been in construction all my life, my career. I did manufacturing of construction equipment. And then this is my third term here in the State House. And I've been on Public Works now. This will be my third term in Public Works. But I do want to testify that the Public Works Committee has been very interesting, and I've enjoyed being involved with everybody on the committee, and it's been very nice to work there. So thank you all.
Thank you, Representative. Next up is Representative Jim Phidolfi.
Hello. I started out in the Air Force. I was Air Force Intelligence. I was a radio intercept analyst. When I got out, shortly thereafter, I got married, a wonderful woman. After a couple of years, we moved to New Hampshire. We've been in New Hampshire now 53 years. I owned a construction company, design, build over 111 commercial industrial buildings, including one of the biggest class man building east of the Mississippi down in Massachusetts. During one of the Bush administrations, we went bankrupt. I then started Value Mart, a retail store in Chichester, New Hampshire. Sold it about 15 years ago, moved to Hillsborough, New Hampshire. It's a wonderful place. This is a great committee. The person who spoke before said that politics doesn't play a major role here. Yay. You'll appreciate that. I know I do. I'm getting a little tired of politics. Anyway, I'm going to have to leave you early. My wife caught COVID. I helped her out, stayed with her. I caught COVID. I have to go lie down. I should be all better in a few days.
Thank you for coming, Jim. We appreciate you at least introducing yourselves, and having been on the committee, you know a lot of what the legislative budget assistant's going to say, as well as how the treasurer works. So thank you for at least coming and introducing yourself.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, next up is Representative Clifford Newton. Representative Newton, are you there still?
Yep, I am. I'm off on having a little trouble with the mute and unmute. Can you hear me now? Okay, I can't hear you though, so I'll just keep going. Again, this is my fourth term as a state rep. First time elected was 2002, elected again in 2004, and elected again in 11 and 12. I've been on the Education Committee, the Labor Committee, and in 11-12, I became chair of the Fish and Game. Glad to be here. Happy to be on this committee. I like the non-divisiveness by the sounds of things, and I'm eager to get to work.
Thank you, sir. Representative Melissa Blasic.
Hi. Well, I'm from New Hampshire, born and raised. I am a musician. I own a private music school here in Merrimack. We're actually in my studio. I'm wildly green. This is my first time ever holding office, so I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Next up is Representative Thomas Kaczynski.
Hi. I'm 65 years old, married, and have a college-age daughter. I'm a live poultry dealer. It's a family business. My grandfather started in 1934, and we grew it through the years. Started in Connecticut, where I lived most of my life. We've grown it to be the largest supplier of hens to New York City. I was born and raised in Connecticut, as I said, and moved to up here in 1990, mainly for business concerns. And I'm here to stay. As far as politics, I wasn't elected to local office, but got involved. We enacted a tax cap in Rochester in 2008, and I worked with the less restrictive zoning policy 2011 to 14. And I was elected a state rep in 2014 and 2016 and served on the ED and A committee. And I missed the last session, but winning in 2020, I'm happy to try a new committee out. And I'm looking forward to learning more of the workings of this committee. Thank you.
David, Representative Bordas has joined us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a good thing, he's up next then. Give us a little recap of himself.
Hi, how you doing? I'm Mike Boards. I am originally from Long Island, New York. I worked in radio and the music for 20-something years. Moved up to New Hampshire about 5-6 years ago. Love it up here, and I look forward to working with all you guys.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Representative Dennis Thompson.
Good morning, folks. I'm Dennis Thompson. I live up in Stewartstown, New Hampshire. I represent Coos District 1, along with another gentleman, Donald Dostey. My wife and I have both been in New Hampshire. Well, I've been here my entire life. My wife has been here most of her life. We own a special projects construction company. The majority of the work we do is for state agencies and local towns, solving what many would consider unsolvable problems. We do a lot of our work for New Hampshire Cultural Resources in the restoration of historic sites around the state of New Hampshire. We constructed the monument for the Old Man of the Mountain in Franconia Notch. We've redone the seawalls on Fort Stark on Newcastle Island. And currently, I'm sitting here on the shore of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean, restoring a 750-foot seawall. This is my first term in office. I've never gotten into politics before, but the older I get, the more I see things I didn't like in politics, and I thought it was time to try and do something to affect where things go, particularly in my area in the North Country. Pretty much think that's all there is to know about me. I'm not a lawyer. I've never been a bank president. I've been in the construction industry for 48 years. And I went to high school in Concord at Concord High. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Susan Van de Castille.
I'm coming, guys. Hold on one second. All right. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We hear you.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, you got my name spelt right and you said it properly. It's Susan Van de Castille. This is my first term running and won for politics. It's also my first time being a Republican. I was an independent forever since I started voting. So my girls asked me to run for a state representative for the town of Salem, which I did and surprisingly won, which I'm excited. And I'm excited to be on this board because I was born and raised in Salem and raised by a third-generation mechanic. So I was one of the first few female registered mechanics for the state of New Hampshire and the state inspector in 1991. I've since then stopped turning wrenches and I work at a dealership in customer service. And I've got some great ideas for our highway and transportation. Hopefully I can fit in. And I look forward to the next 2 years.
Thank you very much. Representative John Clutier.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Again, I'm Representative John Clutier from Claremont. I'm now, believe it or not, in my 15th term and my 14th term on this committee. And I served, as I said, and I served on every position on this committee, including clerk, vice chair, ranking member. And last term, I had the honor of serving as chair of the Public Works and Highways Committee. And the one term I was not on this committee, I came to appreciate this committee better. I mean, the committees I served on were okay, but they were not like Public Works and Highways, where we can really get some things done for the rest of our state. And although we have our disagreements, I think we don't really descend into partisanship too much. And so I've really enjoyed my time on this committee. I've made a lot of good friends, not only present members of the committee, but people who are no longer reps or members of this committee. And I again look forward to serving on this committee. My background is right now I'm a private security officer, substitute teacher. I've done other things in my life like drive buses, been a newspaper reporter, been a community organizer, but that's what I'm right now is private security and substitute teaching. And I'm a native of Claremont, and I've lived in Claremont most of my life and in New Hampshire all of my life. And I really look forward to working with this committee to do our part in improving the state. And thank you very much, Mr. Clerk and Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Mr. Michael Edgar.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm Mike Edgar. I represent Hampton. I was very fortunate to be assigned to this committee. I want to say that right up front. I lobbied for it and I got it, and I was really glad to get reassigned to it. But I actually grew up in a little fishing village in Connecticut, Stonington, Connecticut. The only one to be attacked twice by the British and repulsed them twice. And that's basically, but that was in back in 1776 and 1814. After that, I went to Yukon. Then after Yukon, I hit the road, went out to Michigan and worked. And I've been working construction projects most of my life, mostly power plants. But then once I was assigned up this way, after several years, and when we had 4 kids, before we had 5, my wife said we weren't moving. So, and that was good for me because we really liked the place. It's a good place to be. And that was back, like I said, back in, in 76 is when we moved here. So I was basically, like I said, worked construction most of my life, but I was also in the service. I was kind of in the Army in the 60s for a few years. That's a long story, but then I was in the Navy for a little over 25. They finally kicked me out when I turned 62 in 09. And I was very fortunate to work, again, construction side with the Seabees the whole time. I was very fortunate to be assigned to go to several places. As a reservist, I was mobilized or called up several times. It was a great experience, and get to meet an awful lot of different people that way. So as I said, I'm just really glad to be on this committee. It's a great committee to be on, and just look forward to the next couple of years on it.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Representative Karen Ebel.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Ebel. I live in New London presently. I'm really pleased to be back on this committee again, where I have many friends. I'm in my 5th term on the committee. I was born and raised in Ossipee over in Representative McConkey's neck of the woods. Ended up going to college over in Vermont, where I majored in biology and biochemistry of all things. And after doing that for a couple of years, I ended up going to law school at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. Met my husband there, worked as a corporate attorney in DC for about 10 years. And then we came to our senses and left the big city. He was from Ohio. I persuaded him New Hampshire was a better place to go. So we came up here. We've been in New London for about 32 years. I served on the New London Planning Board for almost 20 years, like Representative McConkey, once I start something, it seems to go for a while, but I chaired it for about a decade, done various volunteer positions, that sort of thing, and then decided to run for office. Ended up on Public Works and Highways, and I'm really glad I did. It's been a great experience. You really get to do meaningful things for your district and for your state. And as I said, you meet a lot of great people. In my last term, I served as deputy speaker under Speaker Shurtleff. And once COVID struck, I was very deeply involved in developing the remote capabilities for the committee. So if you don't like Zoom webinar, you can kind of blame me. Anyway, and now I'm serving as the Democratic leader pro tem. And I'm very pleased to be here, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Karen. Next up is Martin Jack, Representative Martin Jack.
Yeah, I'm Marty Jack. I'm also starting my 5th term. I've been on the committee the whole time, and last term I was honored to be the clerk. I'm also a Chicago boy. I came out here to college and I moved up to New Hampshire in 1978. I had a wonderful career doing engineering for one of the larger computer manufacturers. And so I think that's helpful, having an engineering background. The chairman mentioned that he got to go a lot of interesting places. The new people will find that on this committee, you will get to go a lot of interesting places because we build things and then sometimes we get to take a tour of them. And you'll go places that people don't get to go normally, and certainly people on other committees don't get to go. So I guess in the interest of time, I'll end it there.
Thank you. And I just want to point out, as the vice chair said, we work collegially within this committee. And since Representative Jack has been the committee clerk previously, if Representative Mills is not at a hearing, I'm going to ask Representative Jack to fill in.
I'd be delighted with that.
You expected that, didn't you?
I did, actually.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next up is Representative Michael Abbott.
Yes, my name's Michael Abbott, and I'm starting my 4th term, my 3rd term on Public Works and Highways. I, along with 3 other members of the House, represent Cheshire District 1, which is towns of Chesterfield, Hinsdale, Walpole, and Westmoreland. I was born in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Both of my parents were natives of North Adams, Massachusetts, and they're 1st-generation American citizens. My father fought in the Second World War, and he was in the National Guard when it was federalized, and he fought in North Africa and Italy. And he went in as a corporal and came out as a captain because I guess the Germans were trained. He had a choice between an enlisted man and an officer. He shot the officer. And after the war, he married my mother, who had been a high school English teacher for 11 years. And they had my older brother, then myself. My father remained in the National Guard, but then opted to go back into the service. And consequently, we went all over the country. And also when he was assigned to Berlin, Germany for 3 years, we went there. His last station was, he was the Army advisor. He was by then a lieutenant colonel. He was the Army advisor to Western Mass National Guard. Worked out of the Howard Street Armory in Springfield, Mass. And we lived in Long Meadow, Mass, where I went the last 3 years of high school. Then I went to Brown University and graduated from there in 1970 with a degree in political science. I had 3 options at that point. I had been accepted at Suffolk Law School. I'd been offered a job as a systems analyst for Travelers Insurance. and offered a job teaching social studies at Hinsdale High School. I had had it with formal education at that point, so I opted not to go to law school. And being a 60s person, I really wasn't ready to join corporate America. So I went to Hinsdale High School for $6,400 a year, and I taught two classes of 9th grade civics and 3 classes of 11th grade US history. And I did that for 15 years. And I also, because I played football at both high school and college and wrestled at both levels, and became involved in coaching. Hinsdale did not have a football team, nor do they have one now. And I started with junior high soccer and worked my way up. I also became involved with the NHIA, the New Hampshire Interscholastic Athletic Association, and proceeded. At this point, I guess I was ready for formal education to get my master's degree in educational administration at Keene State College. And I became in 1985 the principal at Hinsdale High School, and remained there for 15 years. And again, with my involvement with the NHIAA, I was a member and then chairman of the NHIAA Soccer Committee from 1980 to 2000. And I was also on the executive committee of the NHIAA and served as the president for 1 year. And then I got done there, and I went to work in the buying department at C&S Wholesale Grocers, the corporate headquarters in Keene, and then decided when I reached 66 to, since I had taught civics, that maybe it was time for me to try and put it into practice. I've lived in Hinsdale for 50 years. My wife and I have been married for 46. And we have one child, a daughter, and an 11-year-old granddaughter and an 8-year-old grandson. And that's the story of my life.
Thank you, Representative. Next up is Representative Barry Faulkner.
Great. Hi, Barry Faulkner. I'm serving my 3rd term, again, all in Public Works and Highways. I grew up in Keene, but we moved back to New Hampshire 15 years ago. I ended up in Swansea, so I represent Swansea and Richmond. I'm a land use lawyer in Keene, but prior to that, I had a 30-year career in transportation planning. I'm involved in developing transit, highway, airport access projects across the country. So that's really kind of the source of my interest in what our committee does. I've got degrees in American government and city planning from Harvard, and of course my law degree from Suffolk. We're living on a farm here in Swansea. Our kids are grown, grandchildren, living in the Boston area. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Thank you, sir. Next up.
I was going to mention one other thing, if I can. It's also a reason why this is important to me. I'm the 5th generation of Faulkners from Keene to serve in this House, and I really kind of honored to play that role. And my 4 predecessors, my uncle, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, were all Republicans. So I come from a long line of perhaps that makes it easier to cross the aisle sometimes and work with you guys. So that's my story.
Thank you. Next up is Representative Sue Newman.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm coming near the end. This is really impressive listening to everybody's stories. I feel like I got nothing, but this is what I have. My husband, Ray Newman, is also a state rep. He's on criminal justice. He's in his 2nd term. I'm on my 3rd term at the State House. Been on Public Works and Highways for the duration. We lived in Nashua, New Hampshire for 40 years. I'm originally from Western upstate New York, Rochester. And after leaving Rochester, it was the Vietnam era. My husband was in the service. We were assigned to a post in Germany. So I lived in Schwäbisch Hall, Germany for a while. Then we went to Florida. Then after that was Georgia, Virginia, and then we got to New Hampshire, and we've been here for the last 40 years. We have 3 grown children, 6 grandchildren, and during my time in Nashua, I've been a realtor for 25 years, and I was on the Board of Education for 8 years in Nashua. Interesting part of traveling around the state, the southern part of the state, when people were moving in, moving out, whatever, were the road conditions that I noticed all along the way. So public service, I thought was fascinating to really see how the infrastructure is, it's financed, it's organized, and how it's so vital to the state of New Hampshire. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Representative Michael Peterson.
Hi, Michael Peterson, State Representative, second term from Nashua. This is also my second term on the Public Works and Highways. I won't go into my entire life story, but I'll tell you, I have an engineering degree from Wentworth Institute in Boston, and I married a local Newton, Massachusetts girl. We have 3 daughters, and we've been living in New Hampshire for 27 years, and I am now widowed, and I have 3 adult daughters. And I also, aside from being a state representative, I serve on the Nashua City Planning Board, and that's interesting and relevant, just like this particular committee is also relevant to the people of New Hampshire. So in the last term, to borrow an expression, we worked collegially, and that was really good to know. And I can look forward to doing good work in this committee again this term. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Representative Joshua Query.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Query. I live in Ward 9 of Manchester. I grew up in rural Indiana, and I moved to Manchester at 18, so 10 years ago this coming July. I graduated from New Hampshire Institute of Art in 2016 with a degree in ceramics and minor in printmaking. I grew up surrounded by construction with my father's steel manufacturing company, so I kind of got a real in-depth of building maintenance and infrastructure from a young age. Since graduating college, I've worked as an educator, a studio manager, an art restorer. I've worked in construction, and most recently, or currently I should say, a UPS package handler. So working from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. So if you got a Christmas package from UPS, I probably loaded it on there. And this coming fall, I'm going to be returning to school part-time, getting a master's in architectural design, focusing in historical preservation.
Thank you, sir. Finally, Mr. Chairman, our last person to speak is Representative Lisa Bunker.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Bunker. I'm starting my second term as a New Hampshire State Rep representing the town of Exeter. Last term, I served on the Ways and Means Committee. I gather I'm the only new Democrat on Public Works this term. I'm here because although I found Ways and Means interesting in many ways, I wanted to work on a committee that did work that actually impacted the lives of Granite Staters in a direct way. And also because I was looking for a place that was nonpartisan and collegial, and I asked around and heard that this was the place to be. I'm a relative newcomer to New Hampshire. I moved to Exeter just under 5 years ago when I met the person to whom I am now married. I lived before in Maine. I've also had homes in Washington State, New Mexico, California, Pensacola, Florida. I worked 30 years in public broadcasting in many of those places I just mentioned. I am now currently self-employed as a writer. I've had 2 novels for young readers published in the last 3 years, and I'm working on a number of new projects. I should note that although I am a relative newcomer to New Hampshire, my 8 times great-grandfather, John Bunker, a pre-Revolutionary War farmer, is buried outside of Durham. So I was away for a while, but now I'm back, and I'm very pleased to meet you all.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, this concludes our little autobiographical briefing, and it's all yours now.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. As you see, we have a pretty diverse group with a lot of different backgrounds, but that's helpful as we go through the various bills that we will be getting. We'll talk about the workload a little bit later. Everybody took less time than I thought. I thought we'd spend at least an hour on this, if 23 members at 3 minutes each, but that's okay. We're going to go forward. The only thing I'm going to ask is if you leave the meeting for some reason, just make that known. If you have to leave for a break of some kind, darken your screen so that we know that that's the reason. And Mr. Vice Chairman, if mine goes dark, you're in charge. Let's go over some of the ground rules now that we've gotten to know each other. And you're really getting a little bit shortchanged by doing it via Zoom, because a lot of the relationships are built as we have a cup of coffee during breaks in the committee and the rest, and you just talk with people. We will start doing that sometime in the near future, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. The idea is that all of our meetings will be noticed in the House calendar, whether it's in person or remotely via Zoom. And they will appear, and it's my goal to start on time. I know a couple times when I filled in as chair over the years, people would wander back after lunch when the calendar said we started at 1, they'd show up at 1:10 and I'd already started the meeting. So if it's in the calendar to start at a certain time, I do want to start on time, if at all possible. Second, I think, did everybody see the email from the House Clerk about an email address, where he asks that you have a single email for all of this, so that notices that come out about committee meetings, because you will get notified whether it's in person or Zoom, or if you have a bill being heard, you'll also be notified electronically. I know in the past, some members have said, oh, committee should use billybob@gmail.com and not what was listed on the House website. The clerk, the speaker, and I all ask that you pick one and use it. Because when I send an email out, all I'm going to do is go to the Public Works page on the House site and just hit the button that says email all committee members. It's just so much easier. So hopefully that will be the way that it is. But let me know, and let the clerk, a House clerk, know, more importantly, if the one that is on your web page is not the one that you want used for all of this type of thing. Any questions about that? If you have a question, you can do it either way. Just raise your hand, or there's a little raise your hand button at the bottom, and I can see that. Yeah, Michael. Are you on the phone or are you talking? Never mind. let's see, dress and decorum.
His hands up.
Yeah. He's on the phone. Okay. Public meetings, whether it's via Zoom or in person, are just that. They're open to the public. And we are representatives not only of our own town, but also of the entire state. So please dress accordingly. I know that there is not a formal dress code for the House, but it is expected both on the House floor and in committee that you dress appropriately. And for many, many years, and for me at least, that means coat and tie for the gentlemen. And I'm not going to try to tell the ladies what is appropriate. We've been down that one before. But please do that. And decorum is important. We're not there for our personal agendas on the committee. We may have bills in on various other committees that express what you want, but please, no talking across other people while testimony is going on. And we'll get into how that works in just a few minutes. But you are representative of the House, and anything you say or do will probably be recorded by somebody. And if it's not great, we will all hear about it. So when we get into the legislative office building, there is a committee room that has drawers. The returning members, whichever committee, will know what I'm talking about, where you can store things. Those will not be open until we resume normal operations within the State House complex. So you're going to have to drag your stuff back and forth every day that we have meetings in Concord. Just be aware of that. It looks like it's going to be probably after crossover. Hopefully everybody remembers what crossover is before we really get everything under control within the entire complex. And that's just a function of being vaccinated and the rest. But once we get into them, you're free to leave whatever you want in there. Please don't leave too much food because there is the potential for mice and ants and other things, which has happened in other committees and not ours. And please don't lock them and take the key with you. Sometimes you'll lock it and then other members' drawers will either not close all the way or won't open. If you're going to don't like the key sticking out, put it in the drawer and do that. Seating assignments, we'll do that in our first meeting. Returning members, you can go to the seat that you want or where you were, and the others we can fill in. I know that in some of the literature it says the chairman assigns it. That's never been the way within Public Works. So we'll try to work on that the first time. And if you don't like where your name tag's been placed by our assistant, feel free to move it and talk with the other people around you. The only ones that can't change are myself, the vice chair, and the clerk. We have to be at the head. I've always sat at the end of one of the arms of the U for 9 terms. I kind of liked it because I could exit quickly if I had to, but now I'm stuck at the head of the table. And then we'll also go over the fire exits, fire alarms, and those types of things the first. Are there any questions about just kind of ground rules and decorum and the rest? And okay, moving on. The committee. I have been told by the speaker to do this. Rule 30 is the charge to the committee. It shall be the duty of the Committee on Public Works and Highways to consider all matters pertaining to the development and repair of public highways, the highway fund, the turnpike fund, buildings and capital construction, the capital budget, matters pertaining to state bonding authority, capital expenditures related to the improvement and preservation of the coastline, the care of state memorials and monuments, and such other matters as may be referred to it. That's kind of in a nutshell. It kind of explains everything that we do. And we'll talk about typical bills here in a few minutes. Hopefully everybody has looked at the House rules, either in preparation for our last session and what changes were being proposed or not passed. But there are important pieces in there to include the responsibilities of members on committees. As you looked at the makeup and listened to the roll call, we have a larger committee than usual. We have 23 members, which makes it one of the largest committees in the House. We're larger than the Finance Committee at the moment. And the partisan breakout is 12 Republicans, 11 Democrats. So I don't know what that means when we come down to voting, but I do know that it means that the speaker, when I talked to him about it, said that we work collegially so we could work out our differences and get things passed. As the clerk and the vice chair have said in their opening remarks, we tried to get things out, and Representative Clutier also talked about this. We tried to get things out on a consensus basis. We don't always all agree, and there have been, times where we've had partisan fights. The one that comes to mind to me is passenger rail and whether or not to go forward with that. If that is a partisan issue, but by and large, most of ours come out when we had 20, 19-1 or 18-0, depending on who was there. And it just makes it easier to work on the floor of the House to get things done if we can reach consensus through amendments, whether to pass or not pass bills. Any questions on the charge to the committee? Okay. Let's talk about typical bills. And if any of the returning members want to chime in while we're going over this, capital budget is the big one that we'll be dealing with the first part of this year. That is equivalent to, I think, Representative Clutier has always said 12 to 15 or somewhere in that regular bills, because what it is, it's $140 plus or minus $1 million worth of bonding of state money for capital improvements across the state. The governor will give us that, his proposal on that on the 15th of February. By law, he has to give it to us not later than the 15th of February, along with the operating budget, at which point I will get it turned into a bill. And then we begin to hold public hearings on that. We will hear from virtually every state agency, not only on what is in the capital budget as proposed by the governor, but also what they would like to have in it. And when I say agency, it's not just state agencies. We'll hear from the community college system, the university system, and some others along the way that we have supported in the past with capital expenditures. Just be aware that if people reach out to you about the capital budget, you can commit your vote on something, but you can't commit the committee. The committee vote at the end on the capital budget is what commits the committee on what we're doing with the capital budget. It will take time. It will be, we'll talk about how the hearings are going to be conducted here in a few minutes, but it's going to be a challenge to do that in the current environment, hearing from every agency, and I'm still working with the speaker on how we get to do that. Speaking of the capital budget, there is a long-standing tradition within this committee that we do not pass capital expenditure requests outside of the capital budget. That's only so that we have a handle on state bonding and what our debt service will be in the ongoing years. I know that there are 2 bills that are currently assigned to the committee that ask for that, for additional capital expenditures outside of the capital budget. We will have to deal with those in the very near future, hopefully before the 15th of February. And I'm guilty because one of them I am the sponsor of. Do I have any questions about the capital budget? Quiet group. This is unusual for the committee. I will say this, because if we were sitting around the table, there would be questions and comments. I know.
It looks like a representative
Barry,
wants to speak.
Barry, go ahead. And excuse me if I seem informal, but during these work sessions that we have just within the committee, we tend to be a little less formal, and especially after we've gotten to know each other. And I've known Representative Faulkner for more than a couple terms now, so I know he does not take offense when I say Barry.
Not move it. I thought, if you might want to go over what we're going to hear from the treasurer in terms of our bonding limit and how much flexibility we actually have to deal with that. I think that might be a good guidance.
Well, actually, the treasurer will be on with us later this morning. She will talk about how she determines the amount of money we can borrow in any given biennium. And that deals primarily with projections of future revenues and what our debt service ratio to future revenues will be. And she will get into that, and we will get another briefing from her once we get the capital budget. And that's a sensitivity analysis on if we borrow 6.5% of anticipated revenue or 6.7%, how much does that change what we can do as far as work? And it usually ends up in the millions when you change it a tenth of a percentage or whatever. I know that Representative Ebel asked the treasurer to do some sensitivity analysis 2 years ago, and it was amazing how much just a small fraction of change in the debt service ratio meant to what we could do as far as capital improvements were. But thank you for the question, Barry. Representative Ebel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, but I don't know when the appropriate time is to ask it. Is it correct that there were several projects that we authorized through the capital budget that were put on hold because of the pandemic? And do we have any sense of what proportion there were or how that all worked out? And again, that may not be something that we have an answer to right now, but I was just curious.
I do not have it in front of me. I know that Representative Clutier and Representative Edgar and others, we did get an update as part of the capital budget overview committee, which is a statutory committee on which we served that oversees capital improvement outside of the regular legislative process. Yes, the governor did suspend all capital projects at the very start of the pandemic when it looked like I have a cuckoo clock in case you can't figure that out. And there is no way short of stopping it that I can do anything with it. Anyways, the governor did pause all new capital projects with very few exceptions at the start of the pandemic. He has been on a case-by-case basis allowing them to proceed with either engineering or actual moving on to construction. I will make sure that we get the most updated list of that when we start, because for those that are not done, we will, as the returning members know, as part of the capital budget, we have to either extend the appropriation for another 2 years or not. And that whole, it's called lapses and lapse extensions, is a whole day of listening to agencies as it is. But part of that is going to be because of the pause that was put on all of these projects. So there will be a larger amount, I think, this time around, because I don't think, even if the contracts are let this spring, the money will not be fully obligated by the 1st of July, so we'll have to extend it. But we'll get into those details once we actually see what the governor proposes, and then get an update from administrative services and other agencies on what they have done or not done. Hopefully that answered your question, Karen. Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't know if it's a question for the treasurer or not, but I know the one bill that we passed, bonding $50 million to loan to municipalities to remedy the PFA's situation, whether that, what the status of that is. Because I mean, I think it obviously have an impact.
I do not know what the status of that as far as letting the bonds out. And you might be able to ask the treasurer when she comes on. But yes, it will have an impact, because all bonding impacts our debt service ratio, which then impacts on what we can borrow for the coming biennium and the future. So that's why we don't like to, as I said earlier, do standalone capital appropriations, because it does work into the whole bonding issue, which we are supposed to be overseeing. The other thing that some of the returning members may know, that in one of those omnibus bills that was passed by the Senate and the House, there was some additional money for CTE, Community Technical School in Hudson. But that money was found by using money from projects that was already completed, so it would not impact on the overall debt servicing within the state. It was already figured in. Okay. The second major item on typical bills is in the second year of the biennium, and that is the 10-year transportation plan. It always comes in the even numbered years. And in that, we deal with all facets of transportation within the state. It's not just roads, bridges, highways. It's rail, aeronautics, bus transportation, all of those types of issues. And we will be getting a briefing at some point from the Department of Transportation on their function in all of this, as well as their challenges with funding with this. And some of that will deal with what happens in Washington, D.C., because a significant portion, like almost all of it, for what we do comes from the Federal Highway Fund. And so we will have to get into that. And we will get a briefing on that this first year, and then again in the second year, because everything that we do, people are going to be asking you what's going on with transportation and highways and bridges, why the bridge in my town isn't fixed, or when it will be fixed. those types of things. And then all bills dealing with changes to the highway fund, which by constitution is primarily the road toll or gas tax, as most people call it, and registration fees that the state collects goes into the highway fund, which can only be used for roads and associated things such as staffing of DOT and the rest. And also any changes to the Turnpike Fund, which is collected, as everybody knows, at the toll plazas throughout the state. All of that comes to us. There is at least one bill in the House. I do not know where it is because it has not been assigned a bill number yet that deals with a road usage fee. I do not know whether that will come to us first or go to Ways and Means first. In the past, it has come to us first to see how it fits in to working the highway fund and then gone to Ways and Means. But I do not know. The chair of Ways and Means is the primary sponsor of that bill. There is a similar bill in the Senate. Do not know where that will go, but if it comes over, we may see that in the second half of this year. And we can talk about that if and when those bills show up in committee. And then we have bills that name things. You know, to name the bridge in Bedford, the John A. Graham Memorial Bridge. Not yet, guys, not yet. But those would come to us if it is a state bridge, state road, state highway, or state building, because they are state property, and we are the committee that it comes to for approval. It's fairly simple, but a lot of them are memorials to somebody who has passed and has had significant contribution to our nation, our state, or even their own town. So be on the lookout for those. And then finally, as I read in the charge, monuments and memorials. We do get those. There are not a lot of new ones being built. The most recent one is the one across from the State House for what's his name? Somebody.
Wyman.
Yeah, thank you. That is in front of the State Library. And so we have to look at those and how they're going to be funded. The one over at Odeon Point was funded privately. Most of them are. There's one in front of DOT on Hazen Drive that is being raised. The money for it is being raised privately as well. So it depends, but we will get them. I have not seen any right now, today. Without the capital budget, there are only 5 bills that have been assigned to the committee. 2 of them deal with capital requests. One, Melissa, deals with Turnpike toll plazas in Merrimack, and one deals with a sound wall in Bedford. Guess who put that one in? But if those are the 5, and I forget what the other one is, they're on the website. You can look and see what they are and read them ahead of time. But if we do not get any others, my intention is to hear all 5 of those in one day. And hopefully it will be, we'll get into hybrid meetings in a bit, but one long day. The speaker has given the chairman the authority to do same day executive sessions. It will be my intention to do that if the committee can agree on a way to handle each bill, so that we're not coming back in a second time just to have a half-hour executive session. It is a change from normal House practice, where you usually have at least a week between the hearing and the rest. If there is controversy on any bill, I will do that. But I think that given the circumstances at the moment, if we can either at the end of a bill or the end of a couple bills, like handle both of those for capital requests in one executive session after hearing both of them, we do that and move on. And that will clear the deck before we get the capital budget, so we won't have anything hanging over us unless we get a second committee bill. Now, second committee bills, the returning members all know what that is. It is one committee will hear the bill, make a recommendation to the House. If it passes, if there is another policy or financial interest that has to be resolved by a different committee, it gets sent to a second committee. We occasionally are either the first committee, as I said, like on the anything changing or raising the gas tax would come to us and then go to Ways and Means. Sometimes it's the other way around. It will go to transportation or something like that, and then come to us. But those are always on a deadline, and so we'll have to just be cognizant of that. And I will let you know which ones are have to be done early. The rest are done within the guidelines that we agreed to at our last session as far as deadlines for working on bills. And those are printed in every calendar. Calendar notices, I mentioned that earlier. All meetings, to include like this one or any work sessions that we have on the capital budget, have to be noticed in the calendar. So look there every week, either online or if you've elected to get it sent to you, please read it. It's important that we be here. And we'll go into anything on just the kind of work that we do, anything else, anything that I forgot, the types of things. Yeah, Representative Jack.
Thank you. It's probably worth mentioning on second committee bills that you're only supposed to examine the issue that brought it to the second committee and not the entire bill.
That is correct. The one committee that is notorious for changing things once it gets to them, changing policy, is the Finance Committee. They're supposed to looking at whether or not it is fiscally responsible or there's a capability to do it. But a lot of times, depending on who the chairman is, we'll also look at the policy and change the policy that came out of a different committee, which kind of irritates some committee chairmen when that happens. That has not happened to us. Most of our bills are standalone to include the capital budget and the 10-year plan. They do not go to finance as a second committee. So we are responsible for that. There, as I said, you will find when we start going back in that our committee assistant has placed bills in front of your nameplate. Normally, I would say don't take them home because you're going to need them again. But since we're not going to be able to get at your personal drawer, you're going to have to take them back and forth. So just plan on that. Public committees, public hearings are all public. There is no, some people hear executive session, that's still public. And we'll talk about executive session in a moment. but it is still a public meeting, and the public is entitled to be there. The public hearing, no quorum is required. A quorum in our case is 12 members. If there's only 2 of us, we can still hold the public hearing. Not ideal, and I would appreciate, and I think all of the members would appreciate, maximum participation, because that's where you get the information about the bill from both the sponsors, the critics, the supporters, and the agency if it has an impact on an agency. And you need all of that to actually make up your mind on how you're going to support or not support a particular bill, or how you think it should be amended. So please, I ask that you make an effort to make committees, and I'll just leave it at that. Yes.
Chairman, I think Representative Faulkner had a question.
I missed that one. Who?
You can take it up in due time, but there was some talk about combined committee hearings. Would that apply to first and second committees, or how would that work? Or is that not relevant to what we're talking
about? What was that again, Barry?
There's some talk about having larger hearings, committees, 2 committees participating.
My discussions with the Speaker's office have been that rule that we approved would allow the Speaker to say, for example, Public Works and Ways and Means are now a combined committee with 1 chairman and the rest to hear the road usage fee bill, and not have first and second committee. I know in the past, speakers have said meet together and vote separately. This rule would allow it to be 1 vote and 1 committee report, 1 recommendation to the House. So we're working on that. I don't see us involved in a lot of those, maybe 1 or 2. And if so, I can imagine that we would have that in Representatives Hall or via Zoom, 1 of the 2. Because you start talking 40 people or 50 people in a room, there's none big enough other than Reps Hall. But that's where we are. So as I said, a quorum is not needed, but it helps if you've been there when we get to the executive session, rather than trying to catch up on what was said during the hearing. Typically, the way it works, and I probably putting those of you who have been on various committees before to sleep, but the sponsor or sponsors of the bill will come in and introduce the bill to the members of the committee, and then take questions on why the bill has been put in. We hear from the sponsors first, and then we hear from members of the public, both pro and con. Now, if the governor or the Chief Justice come in, they're obviously going to go to the head of the line as a matter of respect for their heading up the other branches of government. Or if the speaker comes in, I will probably let him speak as well. But I don't expect that to happen. I expect those directions to come in private. But that works. And I want to talk, because it's important, that you are entitled to ask questions of everybody who testifies. They do not have to answer your question, and most of them will, but we've had people come in and private citizens who are there to make a point. They don't know the background, they don't know the rest. Don't engage them in a debate. That And that's true of anybody. We're not, when you ask them a question, it's not to engage in debate, it's to elicit information, to clarify something in your mind. Debate comes in our executive session amongst ourselves. So please, getting back to decorum, and that's part of the decorum. You just go, you mentioned that X, Y, Z will happen if, what if this bill doesn't happen? What is the consequence? Those types of things. I would also like to see a whole lot fewer of speeches from members that end in "would you believe." Too many members use that as a mechanism to make a speech while somebody is testifying. It's sort of like, well, I don't agree with your position, and I think X, Y, and Z is not very good. Would you believe that? That's not a question of the person who is testifying. So please, it's solicit information. And if you want to argue when we get into exec session, feel free. All questions are directed through me. I will recognize you if you have a question of a particular speaker. Raise your hand, make sure that the vice chair or the clerk or the ranking member know. They'll all make sure that I know that you want to ask a question. And knowing all of you, and I'm sure that nobody's going to be shy about making sure that I know that you want to ask a question. So that is helpful. And if there are multiple people trying to ask a question of the same person who is testifying, I will try to take them in order. You get one question. And then if you have a follow-up, you ask me for permission to ask a follow-up. You don't just have the floor once I call on you. That's a house rule. That's a longstanding house policy as well. It just keeps control of the committee hearing, and I would ask for your cooperation in that. If you start to ask a second question, I will probably say something along the lines of, you have a follow-up, representative, just to remind people that they do have a responsibility to ask the chair, whoever happens to be in the chair, for permission to ask a question. If you ask a question that has already been asked and answered, I will probably bite my tongue and not be sarcastic, but please don't do that. It has happened, not too badly in this committee, but in others that I've sat in. They've answered the question, and then 10 minutes later, while they were answering another one, a representative will ask the exact same question. It's just not very professional, because it shows that you haven't been paying attention, and it also wastes time, which I don't think any of us want to do. I mean, we get the big bucks, but it's just not worth it. Okay, anything about people testifying, asking questions, no speeches that from anybody else want to chime in? Representative Clutier, did you have something?
Yes, I mean, the question is too, I know because of COVID-19, are people who want to come in and testify going to be allowed to do so remotely?
I was going to get to that when I got to, I have a whole discussion on hybrid meetings.
Okay.
Short answer is, yes, the public will testify via a remote platform. And that's still being worked out. The committee will come in to a double room so we can be socially distanced as much as possible. Members themselves will have the option, at least initially, to come in remotely and participate that way. Especially, like right today, Representative Phidolfi would probably have not been welcome in the committee. Not that we wouldn't want to see him, but because of his health situation. So people are going to have to make those decisions. At some point, either later in this calendar year or next year, once things are under control with vaccine and everything, we will go back to our traditional way of holding in-person testimony, in-person hearings. But right now, the health and safety of not just the members and staff that at the House, but also of the general public who want to testify. As all of us know who have been there, if all 20 House committees are meeting, there are several hundred people roaming the halls at any given time. So that it's just not conducive to the general health situation at the moment. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Representative Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If same-day execs are going to be more in the nature of regular order, we're going to have to be a lot more sensitive to needing quorum, even for public hearings, because there might be an exec, and you wouldn't want to miss a vote just because you weren't there.
Thank you. That was next on when I was going to get to exec session, because in the calendar, every calendar for every committee will have a statement that says executive session may follow at any time during the day, or words to that effect. So if you are not there, you don't get to vote later. It's when the question is put by the chair is the time that you get to vote. Which then we'll talk about exec sessions and the rest and absences in a little bit. But I thank you for bringing that up, Marty, because it is important. I mean, I can imagine that first meeting we have, which will not be until after the 25th of January, that's a given. I heard that from the speaker yesterday, because they are still trying to make sure that they have the UV lights and air exchangers and everything working within the committee rooms. But that will be 5 bills. It'll probably be another long day with the exec sessions that I would like to do on the same day. Normally, just for the new members, there is no action on the bill on the same day that it's heard. That's to give us a chance to, any member to do some additional research or the rest. It's usually a week or two following and noticed in the calendar. So please, this will be different. One other thing about conflicts of interest. You all probably know that in House sessions, if you have a conflict of interest, you have to declare it. And before we vote on a bill, it should be the same in committees. I noticed that one member talked about doing construction for agencies. That money comes through the capital budget. So you're going to have to make a determination on whether or not that is a conflict of interest and file something with the clerk's office that you will or will not participate on the final votes in committee on the capital budget. If in fact you do that kind of work for whatever agency. And that's true of any other bill that may come before us or come before you on the Hill. I just bring that up because I heard it as we were talking earlier.
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, Chairman. But
in anticipation of my election, I've not entered into any new contracts with the state.
Okay. I just bring it up because it's a good way to get people to throw mud at you that you're voting to enrich yourself.
I understand that, and I'm trying to work my way out of the construction business as my years build up here. But I was well aware of that before I ran.
All right, I appreciate it, but I felt it was incumbent upon me to point that out. because it's important. All right, let's talk about hybrid meetings for a moment. Hybrid meetings under the speaker's guidance at the moment, his intention is to have committee members come into Concord into a double room, probably just one day a week for each committee, because there's not enough technology to run all 20 committees at once. We can probably do 4 or 5 a day, any given day, 4 or 5 committees. Committees will be meeting Monday through Friday. I do not know what day we will be meeting at this point. I'm fighting for midweek. And I've also told the speaker that once we start on the capital budget, we're going to need more than one day to meet, because it just has to be done with every agency on what they are doing. So the committee will meet in person. Those committee members who feel unsafe and do not wish to come into the room can come in via remote access. But I will leave that up to you to decide which. The public will be given notice in the House calendar on how to either call in or join via Zoom to give their testimony and present information. The harder part for us and the public, especially if it's just private citizens, is getting their any written information that they have out to the committee members. How do I and we get that in, and how does it get distributed to committee members? If we're in person, that's easier. We just get a Xerox and put it on your desk. But if you're coming in remote, it's going to have to be emailed to you or some other fashion made available. All of those questions are still being worked on. And I know Representative Ebel could tell me she probably knew how to do it, but because we've talked about this before. But it is going to be a challenge. And because some members may be coming in remote, we'll have to take a roll call of those coming in remote via voice at the start of each session day that we're there, committee day, just so that it's annotated on the committee records of who was in committee that day. Normally, we just sign a sheet that gets passed around and everybody signs it, and that's your attendance for the day. But if you're coming in remote, we'll have to make a special note of that. Doing it by Zoom, as I said, will pose some problems. I have asked the speaker, as I said, on the capital budget to allow the agency heads or their designated representative to come in and testify in person to the committee. Only because they always bring reams of paper. And I don't want to print it out at home personally. But it is also useful to sit there and see body language and the rest. The speaker has not given me the okay for that yet, but we're still 6 weeks out from being able to start on the capital budget. For the hybrid, I will be designated as a co-host, as will 1 or 2 other members. I have asked the vice chairman to help. I've also asked Representative Jack to help with some of the technology issues and looking. Reason I asked Representative Jack, one, as we said earlier, it's collegial and we don't really look at party. Plus, he was the clerk for Hillsborough County when we were trying to do all this remotely. Fairly successfully, I will have to say. But thank you both for stepping up. There will be some limited tech support, but not a lot, because we're not hiring a lot of new people to handle this for a short-term thing. Committee clerk, still, you have to record the information of attendance at the beginning of the meeting, to include those in attendance. And then just normal getting the notes from any hearing to the committee assistant for typing up and inclusion in the record. Committee members, well, I talked about this earlier. One email so that you get the request for any Zoom meeting that maybe happen, or if you want to do that. The information that is in the House calendar is generic. It will get you into the meeting, but will not get you in as a participant. The Zoom for panelists, as they're called, comes unique to your email. And so please do that. Before the day of the hearing, please let myself or the vice chair or for the other party, and now just let myself or the vice chair know if you're going to be attending in person or remotely so that we can figure out what to do. We'll talk about exec sessions in a little bit because that's a little bit different. That's so that I know who to look for. I mean, I can look and see if you're not at a chair and say, okay, where is Representative McConkey? Oh yeah, he's on a Zoom and not here. Please don't share that unique Zoom that will be given out to members of the committee. It is only for the committee and legislative staff. And you'll get an automatic second invitation the morning of the meeting, as hopefully everybody did this morning. Okay. If you're participating remotely, it's still, decorum is important, so that we're not talking over each other. Muting, unmuting is important. We will not access, and you cannot access, the chat or question and answer feature of the Zoom platform. If you look at the bottom right now, it's not there. That's to preclude any questions about right to know and open meetings, so that we are not trying to do something in the background. As always, even happens when we're in person, there are emails and texts and the rest that people sometimes are sending, but that's up to you. But if it goes on to something like the chat or a email to all members, if discussing the status of a bill, it becomes part of the bill record and right to know. So please, let's refrain from hitting reply all to say, please vote no, or I don't, do it in public. And I think that's all that has to be said about that. The executive sessions, anything about the remote hearings? Representative Ebel.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So when we're talking about the hybrid meetings, I understand that there are real ventilation problems with the LOB. And in the short term, there are going to be portable ventilation machines that will be put in the rooms. They're going to be double rooms. And I guess all I would say is that I hope that you'll be able to provide as much information as possible, scientific backup or whatever, to make members who are deciding whether to join in person or remotely comfortable in their decision.
I will pass on any information that I have. Scientific information from a history major I would look at as suspect. But what I have, I will make sure that the committee has. And again, it's going to be up to each individual member to decide whether or not to attend that way, at least in the short term, until I wouldn't even hazard a guess as to when things will return to normal. As the speaker said in one of his latest messages to all of us, yes, you have your seat assignment, but I can't tell you when you'll ever sit in it. It's the same with this. I can't ever tell you when we're going to be fully in person for committee meetings. Representative Clutier. Unmute yourself, John. John, unmute.
You're on mute.
John, you're muted.
Okay, yes, thank you. I'm sorry. Do you have any idea, Mr. Chairman, when you'd schedule this hearing? Would it be not until at least the last week in January, even into February?
Right now, the speaker has asked all of the chairmen not to schedule any hearings next week.
Okay.
So the week of the 25th at the earliest.
Okay.
And I would like to do that either that week or the first week in February, depending on what we can work out with what day and the rest, to handle the 5 bills that we have in committee at the moment. If any more come in, it may be both weeks. I don't want to do 7 or 8 hours if people are there, but if it's only 5 or 6, I think that we can handle them all in one day, one longish day, but it's better than coming in 2 or 3 times in a week. It's just, we shall see. Not all of the bills have been given bill numbers or assigned to committees, and that should be finished according to the clerk's office this week. We shall see. But you do not plan on anything next week, the week of the 18th. So
okay.
The week of the 25th, I do intend, if at all possible, to have a meeting. So we shall see. But as soon as I get it and I get the date confirmed, I will email the committee so everybody has as much knowledge as I can give them. Okay. I mentioned, okay, let's see.
Hello.
Peterson, Representative Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. Will committee members be allowed to vote remotely using Zoom?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's the whole purpose of the hybrid. That will be that way. And it won't change much. I know that on some of the committees, that statutory committees that I was on, that Representative Clutier was on, where normally we was chair, normally we'd do a voice vote. We had to do everything roll call. But in committees and exec sessions, we do a roll call anyways. So it's just, you're gonna have to be there and say yay or nay. Representative Newman, you had a question or comment?
Yes, hi. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if any of us know that we have a scheduling conflict, say the week of the 25th and thereafter for an appointment of some sort, should we let you know? So maybe that will help you make a plan, or do you have to make a plan irrespective of anything we've got going?
I hate to say it this way, but given the limited access that each committee will have to committee rooms. And it
Okay.
may only be Public Works, you have Thursdays in a room.
Okay.
We're gonna have to go with that. So, you know, if you're gonna be gone for a whole week, I'm not gonna be able, I don't think, to work it for individual members. But we can see what we can work on.
Okay, and I'll just continue. Like, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I've got a dental appointment coming up, and I'm sure it's scheduled in the morning. It's coming up in February, and something else. So and frankly, given everything, I mean, if you've got a dental appointment or a doctor's appointment, they're hard to get rescheduled also. So is it okay with you if there is a conflict that we attend late if we've got a previous thing that was scheduled?
So, you know, as always, members wander in and out as they want. But if you're there and then not there and you miss the exec session, you've missed the exec session.
Yeah.
That's the only downside to that. But no, if you come in late, that's fine. If you dial in late, you know, or you have to leave early, that's always been the practice of every committee. It is incumbent upon all of us as representatives to make as much of the hearings and exec sessions as we can. So please make the effort, but you're right. If you've got a dental, my dentist keeps calling me going, nope, you can't come in yet. So I understand the problem.
Thank you.
Okay, I mentioned work
I have
session.
a question, John, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
just a couple of things. On the public testimony, the way the protocol was before, people pre-registered if they wanted to give testimony, and then their testimony was emailed out to the committee in advance of the committee meeting. So that way, people who are attending remotely or whatever, they should be sure to get the documents. And I guess I would just, I know you will do this, but I would just put in a plea that to make people comfortable that are attending remotely when we get to the hybrid format, that we all feel that we're able to participate as fully, whether we're there remotely or in person. And I'm sure HCS is working on all those protocols, but I think, you know, people are concerned about that.
They are, and they are continuing to work. It is my understanding that there will be one large screen in the room so that those testifying will show up on that if they're using Zoom, or at least their phone number will show up as it does here on these smaller devices. And that brings me to a piece about electronic devices in the committee. It is hard to say don't use them, but as you all know, if we're sitting around a table and all 23 of us, if we're all ever there, have a laptop popped up in front of us, you know, it is disconcerting to anybody trying to testify either in person or over Zoom, which is why they're bringing in the one large screen for the committee to be able to see everybody see the same thing. Now, the clerk or the vice chair, or maybe all three, or at least the other two, we're going to have something there to look at the remote members and who else is waiting to testify. So we'll have to work on that so that if say Representative Newman or Representative Graham isn't there, but are participating remotely, they at least can see if they're raising their hand or whatever. It's going to be a challenge, and I don't think any of us think that it won't be. But we'll work on it. And as I said earlier, I don't think any of you are so shy that you won't say something that if you're being ignored. You know, a little bit more decorum when we've got members of the public there. And I will refrain from saying Karen or John or David when it's a public hearing, but we'll go from there. Okay, work sessions. Work sessions are just that. It is a meeting of the committee to work on particular items that may be in front of them. It is not a public hearing. The chair may invite people to come in and provide information to the work session, but it is not a public hearing in the fact that the entire public can come and say something at that. It will be listed in the calendar, and it will be listed as a full committee work session. That is the way we will handle most of the capital budget as we have in the past. It'll say full committee work session, 10 to 10:15, the adjutant general, 10:20 to 11 o'clock, another agency, depending on what they've got. But they will be listed, and they are that, and they are conducted along the same lines as a public hearing as far as decorum, asking questions, getting permission from the chair to ask questions of whomever is presenting. So just be aware that those will come up. And that's important because, once we get into the capital budget, we do hear from every agency. And we have, in the second year, we have work sessions on the 10-year transportation plan as well as public hearings, which are different. We'll open, in all probability, work sessions on the capital budget before the bill is printed. I think we've done that in the past, just so that we can get started. And then once the bill is printed, we will hold a public hearing so that people can come in. Most of the agencies will wait until their time, knowing that they have a work session. But members of the public will come in and say their piece on what they think the state should do or not do for capital improvements and how to spend money. Then we'll recess that until after all the agencies have had, and then we'll go into another public hearing and then into exec session. It's kind of convoluted. I lost my first term on it, but found my way eventually. Any questions about work sessions? They are less formal, but still the decorum has to be there. Executive sessions are just that. They are sessions amongst ourselves to determine the fate of any particular bill that's in front of us. We have to have a quorum. A quorum in this case being 12 or more members in attendance, physically in attendance, either in the room or via Zoom if we're doing hybrid. If you know that you will not be present, please let me, the vice chair, Representative McConkey, his phone number is 520-8275. Everybody get that? 520-8275. Know the day before that you will not make the executive session so that we can get a replacement for you. I would ask that the Democratic members also let Representative Clutier or the minority office or whomever John designates to get that that you're not going to be there. Because to be honest, and this is my partisanship, one time showing, I'm not going to work real hard on getting Democratic replacements if you're not going to be in executive session. All replacements must be appointed by the speaker. I can't just go out in the hallway, nor can Representative Clutier go out in the hallway, grab the next Republican or Democrat and say, fill in for Representative whomever. But if the speaker appoints them, they become voting members for the executive session. Most times we don't need them because we've already reached consensus on what we're going to do with the bill. And if it ends up being, 21-2, so be it. I'd rather have it 23-0, but if the overwhelming majority of the committee is supportive, it works. Just so everybody knows, and those who have been chairs know this as well, I can adjourn the executive session at any point where I don't think I'm going to get the outcome I want. Just the power of being the chair. Up until the time that the question is put to the members for a vote. If 2 minutes before that happens, it looks like the motion that is on the floor that I may or may not want is not going to go the way that I think it should. I can adjourn the executive session to another time and then work on it. We may still be the same outcome the next time, but that is one of the powers that the chair has. The other thing that I need to point out about executive sessions, everybody knows this, is that there is no public input without my approval. It is not another executive session. And it's not another public hearing. If you have specific questions, pose them to me and I will decide whether or not to pose it to a sponsor or agency or whomever. This does not mean that you're not free to go out and ask questions of sponsors, lobbyists, or whomever before the exec session to try to get your question answered after the public hearing. But I don't want to turn exec sessions into a second public hearing, if at all possible. All amendments that are being proposed, and any one of you can propose an amendment to any bill we have, has to be prepared by Legislative Services, and we will get copies printed and brought down to every member of the committee. I think everybody knows what the basic motions that can be heard in a executive session are. It's ought to pass as amendment, inexpedient to legislate, or retain. And retain is only for this year. What that means is we will hold the bill for additional work in the summer or fall, and then come back in the fall for a final executive session on the bill so that the House can vote on it in next January of 22. In order for an amendment to come forward, there has to be a positive motion, i.e. ought to pass motion on the floor in the committee. Just because you have an amendment prepared doesn't mean that the committee is going to take it up if there is not an ought to pass motion or ought to pass as amended motion on the floor. I get to call who makes the motion. And as many times as some of the returning members will know, prior chairmen have gone, just turn 11. It's not quite right.
What is going on?
The chair, I can turn and go, And I believe Representative McConkey has a motion to make. And I know that one previous speaker used to do be a lot, not knowing I was making the motion. But just know that I get to pick who it is. If you make the motion, you have to write the committee report for the House calendar. And if there's going to be a minority report, I approve both the minority and the majority report. Just for factual information, and then it gets sent into the clerk. That's exec sessions, and that's a couple of other points. Any questions about exec sessions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say too that if a member is absent from my caucus and I'm for some reason not available, they should contact Representative Edgar, who's the deputy ranking member and a former vice chair of the committee. And you and the vice chair McConkey should know that as well.
All right, thank you. And
good job, very thorough.
Well, it's harder to do with this because I'm doing all the talking without people, nudging me, going, "Did you remember this? Did you talk about this?" So, anyways,
but thank you. You're doing a good job. I mean, it's better you than me, I think, right
now. Two other things I'd like to mention. There is committee staff assistant. Brad Greenland, are you on?
Yes, I am.
All right. Brad is our committee researcher. Researchers serve as resources for the entire committee, and resources that request to him for information or help goes through the chair. He works for several committees. So in order for him to know that it's actually coming for the entire committee and not just an individual, please let me know. In all probability, I'm going to say yes, but just do that. Brad, where'd you come from? I know you're relatively new.
Yeah, so I started back in the middle of March, just before everything shut down. Before that, I worked for the Department of Safety and dispatched for the state police before coming over here. And I've been in New Hampshire my entire life. I was born in Nashville. I grew up in Merrimack, and then now currently live in Manchester.
Thank you. I just wanted people to know who the person was who may at some point be sitting in the back of the room taking notes, or when we ask to get things. Committee assistants are administrative assistants to several committees. They are not there for committee members to have things typed, mailed, any of that kind of stuff. When Representative Mills is finished after each hearing with his handwritten notes, he hands them to the committee assistant to be typed up and put in the proper order. So we will be sharing one. Ours this term, for the short term anyways, we'll be sharing with Ways and Means. She's a longstanding assistant over there. I just got an email from her about 2 minutes ago saying she wanted to introduce herself as the one who will be helping us. So David, I'll forward that to you. And that's it. If we're in the building, there is on the 4th floor, if we get it open, computer support, all letterhead, all that kind of stuff that you may need on the 4th floor of the LOB. And there is Wi-Fi both in the State House and the LOB that members can access. So that kind of it in a nutshell. Any questions of what the committee does, how we work, and it's a work in progress as far as hybrid and the rest, but best I can give you at the moment. Okay. If anybody needs to take a break, do that. Do not, I'm not shutting off or anything because we're going to go right into a presentation from the legislative budget assistant on the capital budget process. I think all of you got from Mr. Shea an email with the outline of how the process works. But I'll bring him up in a minute. But if you have to go, Mark, take over for a minute. I have to depart here. Is Mark here?
Sounds good.
You got it?
John.
I am going to be back in just one moment.
All right then. Thank you. If anyone else wants to attend to some matters, please feel free to. And I think we're going to move on with the presentation in a couple minutes. So I see a few people, so feel free.
back.
While we're in a break, the chairman's clock seems considerably nicer than the prior chairman's clock.
Hi, Mr. Shea.
Good morning, Representative Graham. Good morning, committee.
Good morning.
Just give it a couple minutes as people come back. We've been sitting here for 2 hours, so.
No, that I totally understand. So whenever everybody's ready.
There is one piece of decorum I forgot to mention to all the members. If we're in the building in a committee room, there is no food or drink at the table. That pains me because as most of the returning members know, I drink a lot of coffee. But it is at the direction of the speaker. Let's just leave it at that. Now, if we are there and we take a lunch break, you will be allowed to eat at your desk, only because there's not going to be much open around for you to go eat, unless you want to go outside and sit in the cold. But we shall work on all that. As soon as Representative McConkey comes back up. And he's been here. Most of them have done that. I'd like to introduce, what's your official title, Mr. Shea?
So I'm the Deputy Legislative Budget Assistant.
Okay. He's been working with us for a while. He is the one who will be handling work that deals with the capital budget with us in the committee, and to advise us on what to do. He can't tell us what to do because it is matters of policy, but he can tell us ramifications and what's happened before and whether or not it's legal or permitted. Not legal, permitted to spend money in certain ways. So I've asked him to give us an overview of the capital budget process, and so we understand where we are at the current moment, but more importantly, where the capital budget comes from. And over to you, Mr. Shea.
Well, thank you, Chairman Graham and committee members here today. Just to start, I'll give you kind of a brief overview of the Legislative Budget Assistant Office and who we are. We're nonpartisan. One of the bigger elements that we work on, obviously, is the budget, the operating budget and the capital budget. We have 6 people in our office that do this work. We do it for the House and we do it for the Senate. And we try to provide the information to members as they request it, and provide direction, as may be necessary as you're going through a process. I specifically am assigned to the capital budget and to Ways and Means for revenue estimates, along with overseeing the staff in our budget side of the office. We also have an audit division, which at this point I have nothing to do with. Mike Kane, who's the legislative budget assistant, deals primarily with the audit side of the House. And that's intentional. We try to keep a wall between us so that they can do their work uninterrupted by things that we may be doing on the budget side and working with members. I did work on the audit side for 10 years before coming to the budget side, so I'm very familiar with what happens on that side of the House. But I just wanted to kind of talk that through with you a little bit. I've been doing the capital budget the last couple of years, so I have some familiarity with it. Been doing revenues a little bit longer, and prior to that, I dealt with the operating budget from 2007 when I came over to the budget side. So that's just a real brief kind of overview of who we are, who I am, and what we're going to provide to you. Some of the other services in our office that you may be familiar with is when you see a bill with a fiscal note on it, that comes from our office. So if you ever have a question or a concern about a bill of yours or a bill that you're involved with that has a fiscal note, or may not have a fiscal note and you think it should, please contact our office and we can have a discussion with you as to why the bill may or may not have had a fiscal note, and if it does have a fiscal note, how it ended up with that particular fiscal note. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen. I believe Brad sent you the presentation in an email, but I was going to bring it up on the screen because I wanted to be able to maneuver around on our website as well to show you some information that is available on our website, so that if you have questions after the fact, you may be able to access it. So just 1 second here as I grab the screen. So hopefully what you're seeing right now is the General Court webpage. If you're not, let me know. So I'm going to scroll down that and you'll see the Legislative Budget Assistant is on the left-hand side in the column, second from the bottom. And this is our website. And as I mentioned, we have a budget division and audit division. Going down this left side column, the 4 committees we staff are the Fiscal Committee. There's a Performance Audit Oversight Committee, Long Range Capital Planning, and Capital Budget Overview. So those are 4 committees that we do provide staff for. And I'll make mention a little bit more about Capital Budget Overview and Long Range at the end of my presentation. So if you come to our website, you click into the budget division, you're going to see a line that says budget and revenue documents. And you're going to see 3 areas as you follow my mouse: the operating and capital budget. And I apologize, I'm turning my head because I'm looking at another screen as I do this. So right now for the fiscal 2022 and 2023 operating and capital budget, documents that we have loaded up would be the presentation I'm going to open up in just a moment, the governor's capital budget hearing documents, which occurred back in June. And then there's 2 other documents, which are status updates of the capital budget that was passed in 2019, which I am hovering over right now. And I'll go back to those after the presentation. So here we are with the capital budget presentation. This is the contact information. As everybody's fully aware, we're limitedly in the office at this time. In fact, for the next week or so, we've been asked not to go into the office. So the best way to contact us is through emails. We do check our phone numbers, our phone lines on a regular basis, but an email is much easier, particularly if we're on a remote call. Sometimes we can respond to an email as we're on that and take care of an issue that you might have or a question that you might have. So the next page is just the table of contents of what's contained in this particular document. And I'm going to go through, but not necessarily through every single item that's in here. I may kind of go over some of these rather quickly because it's not necessary to get in a lot of detail at this time. But this first part is RSA 9.3, the statute that basically starts the capital budget process. So if you're not familiar with the capital budget process, it actually started back in April timeframe for the agencies. So they were instructed at that time to think about capital projects that they needed and needed to submit something by the end of by May 1st, and then by the end of May, a document was provided to the governor that he then had to have budget hearings on before the end of June. Those did occur, and as I pointed out, those documents that agencies brought to that meeting are available online, so you're able to look at that. Once that occurred, the governor, along with the director of public works and several other individuals, will look at the various projects that are brought forward by agencies and identify those that they think need further work or detail to be considered for the 22-23 capital budget. So that is done by the Department of Administrative Services Bureau of Public Works, where they go in and refine the numbers, look at issues that may not have been considered by the agency as they're putting together the project, the cost and what they need to do. And then they establish a book, and it's called the Capital Improvement Book, Program Book. I have a copy. I have a hard copy right here. I have hard copies for all the members. They're sitting in my office. I just have to figure out how to get them to you. And from that, they work and put together the governor's capital budget. And the governor's capital budget will come out by February 15th. The operating budget and the capital budget are released at the same time. And that's what you see down right there. That's when the governor needs to release the capital budget. The capital budget is considered a 6-year plan, even though the appropriations potentially could lapse after 2 years. And that's something that your committee often looks at to see, is there an extension necessary for a project, or did it get completed within the first 2 years? And if you're going to extend it, you may want information from an agency as to why. And that's something, again, I'll kind of talk about that as we get through this document. There are other places in statute where the capital budget comes up. For instance, the Lake Shore Redevelopment Planning Commission, there was a segment of their statute that said that they could submit information for capital purposes in the 2020-2021 capital budget. The CTEs, which are at the schools, there's language in here related to that. So that's what these RSAs relate to. I just wanted to include them. They're for your leisure, not necessarily something that we need to talk about in terms of process at this time. But if you see the governor's capital budget in February and you're wondering, how did this end up in there? There may have been a statutory direction to include it in the budget. There may not be, but here are a few of the statutes you may need to consider or would like to consider. So, and I apologize for the scrolling. So this page here, it's page 8 of the presentation. That is kind of a one-pager to show you the process and where, when it starts and when it ends. So as I mentioned, the agencies that started this process before May 1st, they had to have information ready by May 1st. The governor had information provided by May 31st, and then he held hearings by the end of June. And since then, there's been efforts to consolidate some of the projects or look at some of the projects that were being proposed and include them with further detail in the capital improvement program document. Come February 15th, the capital budget will then be in the possession of the House, and you'll have until crossover, which is typically the end of March, beginning of April, to make all your decisions as it relates to the capital budget. And as I heard Representative Graham mentioning earlier, as part of the process, we will help you decide which agencies to bring in before the committee to discuss what their projects are and what they're requesting and what could happen if you can't fully fund something or if you think there should be another project in its place. So we would help coordinate the agencies to come in and do that. I say we, I should mention too, where we are limited in our staff, there may be times, I don't expect it at this moment, but there may be a time when I can't make a meeting that you have because I'm double or triple booked because of other meetings I might need to attend. We may send somebody else from our office just to represent us and to help the committee get through whatever work they have scheduled. And then once the House is done with its process and votes the capital budget out, it goes over to the Senate. They go through a similar process where they work on it. Typically, the capital budget is House Bill 25. So that is an easy way if you ever want to search going backwards in the bills. If you look for previous House Bill 25s, they typically are your capital budget. So you can see, what the capital budget was from 2019 or 2017, 2005. You could go back and pick them in that way. Once the Senate completes its process, they'll vote out their capital budget. And if it's anything like the last time, there'll be agreement already between the two committees on what was changed by the Senate, and you would not have to go to a committee of conference. But that is the last step that the legislature would take as a committee of conference. And typically with the capital budget, the reason you have a committee of conference isn't so much that you're in total disagreement on what was done by the Senate. It's more to make sure that nothing is in error. and to give you kind of one last chance to say, okay, are we all good with what's in this capital budget? We're okay to let it go. There was limited changes between the House and the Senate this last time, so I think that helped eliminate the need for a committee of conference for that particular budget. And then hopefully the governor would sign anything that the legislature adopts by the end of June, and then that capital budget would take effect. So that's essentially what this page is showing you. And here is just a picture of the docket for the capital budget in 2019. You can see that the committee, starting on the 6th of March, had a number of work sessions. Some of these may have been with agencies. Some of them may not have had agencies in there, depending on where you were in the process. But we will help you schedule the agencies you need to have in and how many times you need to have them in. So you may talk to someone initially about their capital projects, and you may need to bring them back in to further flesh out what's going on with it, or if there were questions after the fact. So one of the services, or one of the things that our office will do, is provide you we call it a compare report. So you can see column C, that's the governor and what he had proposed for his capital budget, and it's structured by agency and the name of the capital project. And then how it's funded is in column B. So F obviously is federal fund. BG would be your general fund bonds. And then there's a BO, which are bonds other. So agencies such as Liquor Commission or Fish and Game, former DRED, so escaping me their title right now, Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So they may have other funding sources that are used to take care of projects such as the Park Fund, and you'll see them as bond other. And then you also have highway funds, which would be at the end of this. So we would update this at each phase. And where there was no committee of conference, there isn't a column F, but we would typically have a committee of conference column to show you what the final negotiations were. In this case, the Senate capital budget, which was adopted by the Senate, was really the last change. In this particular document, the grayed out rows are the changes that occurred in the Senate from the House. And in some cases, it was just a note that was added. In other cases, it was the value. And this document typically runs 10, 15 pages. And at the end of it, so typically your House Bill 25 will be divided into sections, and the highway funds will be separated out from the general funds. And that's what you're seeing here. Section 2 is the Department of Safety and Department of Transportation, where they're showing you their highway funds that they would like to bond. There are some, for example, Department of Safety may have general funds matching highway funds to take care of something. So they may have a project split between the two. And I think if I go up, you'll see that Troop C renovation is in both places. It's because there's money from both types of funds being used to pay for that project. And then on the bottom of the document, you'll find the totals as it relates to the highway funds. And then you'll find the totals for the entire capital budget. And the number that tends to be the one that is generally focused on is the total bonds funded with general funds. So here we ended at just under 125 million. The governor, based on the debt affordability information provided by the treasurer, who I believe you're going to be hearing from after me, will come up with a number that they believe is a good number. During that 2019 capital budget, they started at 120 million. The committee felt comfortable after talking with the treasurer and looking at the number of projects that were out there to move closer to 125 million by the time they were done. So that's the compared document. And then the next document in the presentation is the actual capital budget for 2019. So this is the current capital budget that we're involved with. I included in the document just as a kind of a one-place resource if you happen to look at it and you're wondering what ended up happening with the capital budget. And as I mentioned, there'll be multiple sections to the capital budget. Section 1 will typically be all those projects that are going to be funded through general fund bonding. And then you can see by agency, you know, how busy it is, but you see how what the projects are and how they're being funded. But what also is in the House Bill 25 are other sections that help make this work. So I'm just gonna scroll down. So obviously there's footnotes in here, and sometimes that's just to designate that the funding source is, when it's another funding source, what that funding source is, so that there's no confusion. Other times there may be direction on, for instance, if you're buying a vehicle, you don't want it to be bonded for 20 years. The committee would prefer it be bonded for only 10 years. There may be direction included in the footnote around that appropriation. So as I go, so right now we're 7 pages into it and we're still looking at the appropriations. We're through the highway fund. The university system, this current capital budget, the 2021 capital budget, established appropriations over the next 3 biennium. And the first was for the focus on the Spalding Hall, which I believe is their science building. And then they'd have Hyde Hall and then the student centers. And what they've asked for is 10 million in 2021, which is the current budget. Then they would ask for an additional 15 million in the 22-23, and then an additional 17 in the 24-25 capital budget. Those appropriations have been made in the 2019 capital budget. So as of right now, the Treasury would allow the university system to ask for these amounts to be bonded during those timeframes. So unless there's a change to the statute or this chapter law, these authorities would be out there. So other things that go on, there's some boilerplate type language in the bill, like land acquisition is a boilerplate that's in every House Bill 25. Section on page 9 here, bonds authorized. This is actually the appropriation that the Treasury will look at and says this is the authority that's provided to us to actually go out and bond the dollars that have been appropriated in this capital budget. There's also a language in here that allows for the capital budget overview. So it's section 11 right here. So during this 2021 capital budget, if an agency we'll just say it's administrative services and they're trying to do a roof replacement on a building, and they've completed another project that is in this capital budget, and they have money left over, and it could be used to help get the roof done because there wasn't enough appropriated at the time, they can come into the capital budget overview committee and ask that that money be allowed to be transferred into the roof appropriation for the Capitol building. And that way that project could get done. And the theory or the idea behind that is the legislature intended for 124 million or almost 125 million dollars of bonding to occur for the capital budgets, capital projects that are listed in that capital budget. Knowing that they're typically 18 months out before some of these projects really get going, some of the costs associated with them may change. So they either go up in most cases, or maybe the issue wasn't as bad as initially thought, so the agency didn't have to spend as much money. So this just allows for the use of the bonding authority to actually get the projects done. But again, it's not something that the agencies can do without permission from the legislature. They do come back to the Capital Budget Overview Committee. And then I think Representative Graham's favorite part is section 14. And these are the projects where, excuse me, that's not it. I'm sorry. There were some other things that occurred with appropriations in the 19 budget where the committee forced a lapse on some projects and then repurpose those funds for other purposes. But Section 20 is the section I was referencing for Representative Graham, and that's the lapse extended for projects in previous capital budgets. There's about 160 projects in the 2019 House Bill 25 that had their appropriations extended. When you see the next capital budget for 22-23, there's going to be some similar number of projects that will also be requested to extend their appropriations. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Sometimes projects get delayed. The design factor, they couldn't get that done in time to meet the requirements to have a project start when they originally thought. So they're like, okay, we can get it done in 2021, but we can't complete it until 2022. And there's some pieces that we would need to have the funding available for. So what the committee has done in the past is to go through and ask the agencies to come in and talk about the projects they want to extend the lapses for. Just to make sure the committee understands why that's occurring and agrees with that. But it also gives the agencies a kind of a second bite at the apple in case they missed a project that they needed to extend, or they added one that they actually got done sooner than they thought and they really don't need it to be extended. So then it could be closed out. And that's a few pages because it's so long. So again, that's the bill. And that's gets you through what the current capital budget is. This next page, page 41 of the presentation, is the summary pages from the requests made by agencies at the governor's capital budget hearings in June. So this first page is a summary page. So it just has all the agencies listed. And across the top, it has various aspects of a project. Are they acquiring land, the construction, engineering and architectural work? Is it a computer? Other equipment they might need. So they list it out across the top and they give you a value. Unfortunately, what this document doesn't show you is what the funding source is at this time. And then as you go down to the next page, it then breaks it out by agency and the projects that they wanted to fund. And in this case, this is DOIT, and they're looking to fund several computer projects. Some of these are familiar. The cybersecurity is something that they've asked about, I think, the last 2 or 3 capital budgets and have gotten some funding to do that. I think you tend to see more and more computer or IT related projects in the capital budget because a lot of them are costly. And so that's where they've been instructed to put them. Years and years and years ago, some of these projects tended to be done through the operating budget or through other mechanisms. So now you have this issue of these computer projects competing with what I would call your traditional capital projects, the buildings and the maintenance of buildings. And that's something that you as members of the committee will have to kind of decide, how much can you afford to give agencies to do their computer type project, their IT related projects versus the actual building type projects. Administrative services, it will be the largest agency with projects, again, because they're the central agency for the state. They run most of the projects. So they will, and they manage most of the buildings. And so that's what their projects relate to as you look at that. When you have the opportunity to look at the capital improvement program book, it does break out administrative services into components. So you can kind of see, oh, this is for the buildings, this is for the courts, this is for their IT, what's called FDM, for their accounting for the comptroller and for the state. So again, this is just to give you some reference or some guide as to what agencies originally asked for through the governor's office. And then the last piece of this, so it goes on for a few pages. And the last 2 pieces that I'll mention in this document are the Capital Budget Overview Committee. Again, I made comment to them earlier about if there's a need to transfer, but this committee also receives quarterly updates on projects. So the committee will see what the status is of the various projects. If there's a question on a particular capital project and the agency's having some issues, they may come to the Capital Budget Overview Committee for some guidance on that. But this is and I make mention of it because probably a few of you from this particular committee will be assigned a capital budget overview and or long range. So there is a relationship in terms of some of the work you're doing on your committee in Public Works. And then again, the other is long range capital planning and utilization committee. A lot of what they deal with is the disposal of land. So land that may have been acquired by an agency, typically Department of Transportation, to either change a highway or a roadway, with their off ramps, on ramps, or things like that. And then after the project's done, there's a piece of or tract of land that is really of no use to the state anymore, but an entity may want to purchase it. That type of activity goes before the long range committee for them to say, yeah, it's okay to dispose of that piece of property. The other piece the long range does a lot with is lease agreements. So agencies for lease agreements over 5 years need to get approval for that. And something the committee has seen in the last year is a lot of extensions to leases. So it may have been a lease for 3 years to start with, but they need to extend it for another 3 years. They come before the committee because in total, the lease would have been longer than 5 years. So that's it on the actual presentation itself. Again, it's meant to be more of a guidebook, something that when you have a question to be able to pick that up and say, I heard this mentioned, can I find it here? And that's hopefully you'll be able to, the answer would be yes, and you'd be able to see it there. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this particular document or anything I've said at this point. If not, I'm gonna back out of the document. And I just want to click into the governor's capital budget. So as I mentioned, back in June, they had hearings and all the agencies that provided information, we put up on our website. So if you wanted to see what the Department of Agriculture provided, this is their narrative to the capital requests that they're making. And so that may be useful to you as you have time now and you want to see what agencies were requesting and why. This will give you a little bit more of that information. Or after you get the capital budget and you see a project got included, you may want to go back to see what were they originally thinking when they made the request. The other thing that I had mentioned is under the capital budget here, there's the DAS, which is Department of Administrative Services, capital budget project updates. So what has occurred in the last year is that the Department of Administrative Services Public Works Group has been instructed to provide a status update to the governor on where projects are at. With COVID and as well as other things going on, projects have been delayed in different ways. And there was also some concern that we didn't want to incur additional debt if we could avoid it at this time, not knowing what was happening with the pandemic and other activities. So this report, which is dated 10/30/2020, was provided to the Capital Budget Overview Committee. And again, it's just a status update of the projects that are in the 2019 capital budget for fiscal years 20 and 21. And you can see where they're at with that. The document is a fluid document, and I've made a request of Public Works to provide their most recent document. It was due to be updated in the middle of December. At this point, I have not received anything. In fact, I've had no communication back to me from requests I've made from the Ted Cupper, who's the Public Works Director. So I will continue to try to get an updated document. I've also talked to the Deputy Commissioner for Administrative Services about getting an electronic copy of the Capital Improvement Program. He's looking into that for me. If we're able to get that, we will put it on our website as well. And it would be in this area. So from any work that we do for this committee going forward on the capital budget, and there's a document involved, we'll try to include it here. So you, if you do have to work remotely, you have a way to access some of the information that agencies may have provided or documents that were handed out. We'll try to have it on our website. Even if you're doing a hybrid situation, there may be times when you come into the office or come into the committee room and you may forget something there. Hopefully, you know, if it's something that we have on our website, that will be helpful to you. So I don't know if that's really all I had, unless there's any questions for me.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
I was just wondering, I mean, you showed us that the document there, and whether you put it up there and we tried to print it off or whatever. I just wondered if there was some other way, and I'm sure you don't want to put it in the mail, to distribute it.
So at this point, we've been trying to put things on our websites, and we've been emailing documents to committee members. Part of the challenge, this document is not, if need be, at some point, we possibly could mail it to you. But thinking going forward, if you're thinking about agency presentations and having those mailed to you, the issue with that is timing. So we've had an issue even with the fiscal committee this week. We have that meeting is for tomorrow. As of Monday, one of the members of the committee hadn't received their information, their paper information. We made copies that had been out for a week already. So, you know, I've seen in the news, and I'm sure you all have heard in the news that, you know, the Postal Service has been a little bit slower with the volumes and with some of their workload issues. So timing of getting something to you may be an issue, but if you're, for this particular document, we can try to make it available in hard copy. We can leave copies in the committee room for when people come into the committee room. One thing at this point, we will not be back in the office for at least the next week or so. You know, it'd be sometime at the end of January before we are allowed back into the office. So that I wouldn't be able to mail anything to you before that.
Well, but the thing is that I don't know about other members of the committee, but I was somewhat concerned about the paperwork that the agencies would have. I mean, to look at that stuff online, I don't think is a big deal, but for this, it really is a challenge. I mean,
understood.
I am working with the speaker about when we have the agencies come in to talk about their portion of the capital budget, to do it in person in front of the committee. Granted, not all of the committee members may be participating that day, but the vast majority of us probably will. It's going to be not pleasant, you know, it's going to be hard to get stuff. But as Mr. Shea said, timeliness is the real issue of if Department of Safety has, you know, 15 pages of stuff that they want us to read, how do you get it to everybody before they come in to testify? And they may not have it before the day before.
And just a further comment, Representative Abbott, I mean, we're still trying to figure out how to send you the hard copy of this document here. So once we get some direction on how to do that, we may at that time include the presentation that I just did, you know, went over with you online. It's not that we don't want to get it to you, it's just we're limited in some of our abilities at this moment. You know, getting access to the building, getting access to print materials. And it's not just the Capital Budget Committee that we're trying to come up with a way to do this. We have, you know, for us, we have the Ways and Means Committee and anything they might need. But even more so, and scary so, is the Finance Committee and the operating budget. We've had some members suggest that they would like to see agency budget requests in paper format, which we have in our office, but they are thousands of pages long. And thinking about how to get that to the member, it's not something that we're feeling comfortable in terms of trying to mail or ship to the members at this time. It's just, so our office, we've had requests for various documents, and we're trying to accommodate it through electronic means at this time, and trying to come up with a plan to address all the committees that might request things from us, so that we're not treating or offering something to one group and not another.
I understand. I just, would if there was some way possible to do that, to get it to us, that's all.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I'll definitely, like I said, once I know how we can get you the capital improvement program book, I'll make sure that a copy of the presentation today is attached to that, so that you can have that, or in a folder. Again, we may end up putting things in an envelope with each member's name on it, and make it available to you for when you can get in the building, or if you have other ways to access it. Again, we just don't know at this point, and that's conversation we had in the last couple of days, as we've been meeting with the various committees that we staff, and some of the requests, and as I finance is a heavier lift because of the volume of paper that they have, and so we're just trying to be consistent with what we offer each of the groups that we work with. But I understand it. Looking at things online on a computer when you're on a remote meeting is challenging. You're nimble and quick on the computer. And I have closed myself out of remote meetings in an effort to try to bring material up for committee members that we're working with. And so I understand the challenge, and hopefully, in the near future, things will be a little bit different.
Yes.
Could Mr. Shea, can you go ahead and close out the
Sure.
screen sharing so that we can see if anybody has questions?
Yeah, I do. Whoop.
Representative Newman.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Boy, I'm not used to this. You have to go left to go right and whatever. I certainly, I don't understand all of the printing difficulties, but I can appreciate how challenging it is to try and get stuff printed right now. The only my suggestion, for what it's worth, when many of us took our oath of office, several of us delivered them up personally, and I know we went to the security door on whatever street it is, and a security person came out, we handed them in. I don't know that if there's a way to get material printed, if they could be in an envelope or something, and like I'm thinking there's 3 of us from Nashua, if one of us went up and picked something up, I don't know about other areas, and I don't even know if that's practical or possible given space limitations, but that's my suggestion, if we could pick up hard copies.
So,
and if I wasn't clear, my idea is if print material could be in an envelope at the security office, we'd call security when we were outside the door. They'd say, here, you're picking it up for Nashua, whatever, and deliver it out. I just want to follow up my concern with trying to go into the building in the very near future. Is the elevator I wouldn't take now at all. And I don't know about stairwells and hallways and whatever, despite what's going on in an actual double room. So that's why I suggested if something could be made available, we could pick it up at a door.
So, Representative Newman, in response to that, the idea is a good idea. I just don't know if our office can unilaterally say that's what we're going to do for the committees. And so we are trying to work with the Speaker's office and others to make sure that we don't create something that then is expected by every committee. And then I don't know if security would be able to manage that kind of a flow.
Yeah.
I want a paper copy of a bill. I want a paper copy of.
Yeah.
So again, it's not that we're that I'm trying to be resistant to providing you what you're asking for. I want to do it in a way that doesn't step on the toes of the other committees, essentially.
I understand that. Mhm.
Yep, and so once I get some direction, I will certainly let Chairman Graham know, and we'll try to get you the information so that you can do your work. And understanding hard copies of some of this is important. We will try to do our best to take care of that and try to accommodate this committee and the others that we work with to make sure you have the materials and the information that you need to. If you have to work from home or from a remote site, that you have everything that you need.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Do we have any other questions on the presentation?
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah,
Is
Chairman,
it
but
possible, and I don't know what the confidentiality of some of these documents is, but would it be possible for Mr. Shea's division to send this to like the local FedEx offices where we could pick it up? They could copy it, put it in an envelope, and we can pick it up there. I know it's a cost, but it's going to cost to print them one way or another. And there are FedEx offices pretty much all over the state, I think from Plymouth South. And
so Representative Thompson, again, it's not that we want to provide the information and we want to get it to you. We just want to do it in a fashion that is consistent with how other documents are being provided to members. So we have discussed different ways. We talked about Staples, we've talked about FedEx, we've talked about Representative Newman's idea of maybe having something available at the front desk. We've mailed some smaller documents to individuals, or not smaller documents, to the fiscal committee. We've mailed those the last couple of months. It just requires somebody to go into the office and make copies of all that and then drop it in the mail. Because some of these are documents that we don't have control of until just prior to a meeting. It does take a little time to get some things organized and ready to mail or sent out or become available. Once we have a solution, I apologize.
We all have them.
My door. So once we have a solution and we have some direction, we will certainly get the documents out to you. And it may be something where we intentionally wait so that we know that there's a couple of pieces of information that we want to provide you, but it's not available yet. For instance, the treasurer will probably talk about their offering statement document when she comes on. That's a document that I would recommend having that in a hard copy if you can ever get it in a hard copy. It's a great, this isn't the latest one that I have, but this is one from earlier. And I just show you because I've tabbed different things and it's easy for me to go in when there's a question made of me. Again, that's not the most recent one. That's an older one, but there's great information in that document. So it may be something where we know there's going to be pieces of information that are going to come to the committee and we try to put a packet together so that we can kind of do it once.
I've already talked to the treasurer about that. And the challenge that we were coming up with is the same one we've been talking about, is how do you get it out to every member in a timely fashion? But I agree that we all should have a copy of that because it talks about every facet of this state, from the retirement to schools to education level, everything that goes into what the bond council and the bond holders want to know about the fiscal responsibility and capability of the state.
I agree, Representative Graham, and you know, there's a few documents like that that we typically would bring to you when we, in the old days, so to speak, would come in with a pile of documents and leave them for you and talk to them. You know, we would work with the treasurer to make sure we had the offering statements all available to you so that you would have that information. And so it's just a different time. We're trying to accommodate the needs, coordination and direction. And once we have that, we'll get you what we can. But keep asking. Don't be afraid to keep asking. Because the push, you know, the squeaky wheel kind of makes some things happen. So.
Okay. Any further questions just on the capital budget process? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Shea. It's appreciated. I'm sure we will be asking you for more information along the way.
Not a problem. And in the document, my email's there. Just go to our website, shoot an email, and I will respond to you. So
okay.
If you have any, it doesn't even have to relate to the capital budget. If it's a financial matter or a budget matter, or you just have a general question, feel free to reach out to our office. We may not have the direct answer, but we may be able to provide you a contact of someone who does have that answer. So we do try to provide that assistance. But again, thank you for your time today.
Okay, Brad, do we know if the treasurer is on yet?
She is. I just need to promote her one moment.
Okay, appreciate that. Madam Treasurer, welcome. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us a little bit about bonding, debt servicing, debt service ratios, and the rest. I'm sure we'll be asking a lot more questions in the future as we get the capital budget, but this is a good time to start, just so one, you get to know us and we get to know you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It is my pleasure. And yes, so I'm sure there will be plenty of opportunities for us to go over this and to talk in the future once the capital budget is in, is in full force and trying to implement one for the biennium. So first, what I would like to just mention is that Chief Deputy Treasurer Rachel Miller is also on, and I just asked her to stay by just in case there are questions that the committee may have. And, that way, if there's something I can, as I go through the presentation, she might be able to rescue me. Rachel has vast experience in capital budget and bonding. So that's why I asked her to join me today. So if I know she is logged in, and if Brad is able to bring it on, that would be wonderful.
Brad, can you bring her up?
Yes, I just promoted her.
There she is. Okay, you're done.
Very good. So I see she's coming. Okay. So what I would like to do today is, Mr. Chairman asked me to, provide you with an overview of essentially how we determine what we recommend, what Treasurer recommends for capital budget, and some of the tools that we use to determine debt affordability. So I would like to share my screen today. I have a presentation that I just put together just so you can see a few, some of the comments that I would like to share with you. So if you can just bear with me for a moment. My mouse also has to work with me. Okay. Okay, I'm not familiar with this view. Are you able to see the slide right now?
Absolutely, looks good.
Great. Yeah, very good. So, again, I mean, my objective today is to try to answer those three basic questions that were Mr. Chairman asked me to provide: how we determine the amount that we recommend, and the process that we go through to determine debt affordability, and how we calculate those debt metrics that help us evaluate debt affordability for the state. So essentially, there are two methods that we use, two tools, two ways to verify our debt affordability. And the first one is we prepared a debt affordability study This study is prepared by State Treasury and also by the state's financial advisor, Public Resources Advisor Group, or PRAG. We collaborate together to calculate key debt metrics that will help us determine whether the state's levels will remain manageable over the course of several years. The key debt metrics are debt to personal income, total net debt per capita, net debt service to general fund revenues. And the key metric that we use is the debt to revenue ratio. The rating agencies use that ratio to measure whether issuers have excessive debt service, and so if they're able to manage that debt service. So I'll go into more detail in a moment. So I just want to describe the second method. The second method is in statute, is a debt limit calculation prescribed in RSA 6-C:2. And this law prohibits the legislature from authorizing any additional net tax supported debt or debt paid with general funds that will result in actual and projected debt service exceeding 10% of unrestricted general fund revenue. Typically, the results of this calculation are higher, as there's a higher cap than the one that we recommend through the debt affordability study. But this is certainly something that is formalized in statute, and it's a way to, this limit serves as a guardrail to prevent excessive borrowing. So now I'm gonna go into more detail to try to explain those two tools that we use. The first one is a debt affordability study, and that's the one that we use the most. The debt this chart is just it's a snapshot or an easy way to review the debt affordability that we publish every year. So the latest, the last one we did was the fiscal year 19. We're in the process to work on the new one. We expect to issue that one within the next few weeks, and that way you'll have that by the time the capital budget is introduced. So what you see on the screen right now is essentially the results of the debt affordability study, and it provides the metrics that I was just describing. The first one, at the top of the chart is showing our general fund debt, meaning the debt that is paid with general funds, and that's the key that drives the debt to revenue ratios that we calculate for this study. The second ratio is net debt to personal income. The personal income is obtained from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the data that was used there was the data from 2018. So that gives us a debt to personal income of 0.6%. And the other one is the net debt per capita. Also, the census from 2019 gave us information to calculate that debt metric. And the last one, as I mentioned, is the one that we paid the most attention, is the debt to revenue ratio. For fiscal year 19, it was 6.4%. This one is a projected one, is a preliminary ratio of 6.8%. And the rest are projections that we do essentially every year to see how these levels are going to be managed over a period of several years. So that's what the debt affordability study does. And this is important because the rating agencies that is a metric that the rating agencies use in order to measure how bond issuers and states or municipal issuers are managing their debt levels. That is state of New Hampshire is characterized for having a structure and good practices that maintain low levels of debt. So that is important to remember. This study, we recommended bond authorization of 120 million. That has been recommended for several biennia, and it's a typical calculation that we use in order to see how the ratio is going to perform over several years. The rating agencies consider 10% as a warning level. They don't want bond issuers to reach that 10%. So that's something that we know that this 10% is something we don't want to reach. And so then the challenge now is to make sure that our ratios are low enough and consistent enough so the rating agencies can, this is only one component of what they evaluate, but this has been a positive component of the credit rating that New Hampshire has received, I guess, during several years. So this is the ratio that we monitor the most. New Hampshire is recognized for having higher wealth levels, so that's what keeps the other ratios low enough. And one way we can compare this is a Moody's median. We're using here in this chart the Moody's median for 2020 for net debt to personal income was 2%. Net debt per capita was $1,071, and again the debt to revenue ratio for them, it was 3.1%. That's the median. Moody's uses a different way to calculate this median and the debt to revenue ratio, but again, it's something that is recognized as a good standard to keep. So not going into more details there, I want to move to the next tool that is established in statute, and that is the debt limit. Again, prescribed in RSA 6-C:2. And what this law says is that essentially the legislature can authorize anything that is any additional debt that is paid with general funds that will result in actual and projected debt service exceeding 10% of unrestricted general fund revenues for the previous fiscal year. So what this chart does, and this is the certification. So the law also says that the treasurer needs to certify this amount to the legislative budget assistant. So we prepare this certification every year, and this is the last one we have. So what this calculation does is as you can see in the columns, we're including the actual, and the latest again was last year's. We're including the actual debt service, and we're also including the second column. We are including, I guess it's third column. We including bonds authorized and issued, and how we're going to amortize them over time. And then we're also including debt that is guaranteed by the state, and that is debt, for example, from the Business Finance Authority. We have to include bonds that the state has guaranteed in case there is a default there. And so then we come to a total, and then we compare it to 10% of fiscal year 2019 general fund and restricted revenues. And then the result is, the last column is essentially how much more the state could authorize according to this statute. Now, what this chart really, the result of this calculation, and you can see in row for 2021, what we do is we run projections to arrive to a bond authorization that will result of what it is for debt service. So when we ran those calculations, the result was that there is a maximum of 600 million that could be authorized used in this calculation. Now, so again, this is essentially a higher cap that what the debt affordability study provides. And so one thing that I did is, and I mentioned that in the bottom of this chart, is if we were to enter that 600 million into our calculation, our tool that we use for the debt affordability study, the debt to revenue ratio could increase, or would increase to approximately 8.5 to something between 8.5% to 9.5%. So clearly that will put us too close to the 10% maximum that the rating agencies don't want to see. So, but this is something that is established in statute. I think this will provide, it does provide a guardrail for excessive borrowing. Perhaps that's not something we want to get to, but again, if it's in statute, at least the legislature can approve more, based on, couldn't approve more, based on this, couldn't approve more than what this is calculating. But again, we will probably, what we use is the debt affordability study methodology, to talk to you and to recommend the bond authorizations for a capital budget. So I was trying not to get into too much detail, so hopefully I'm not losing you yet. And again, I just want to, based on what I was describing, these are the bond considerations that this committee will have to decide as the capital budget is being reviewed and proposed. So the debt to revenue ratio of 10%, again, is the warning level that the rating agencies monitor, and that is a ratio that we monitor, and we work to make sure that anything that the Treasury will recommend, it is consistent with what Treasury has done historically, and what will ensure it will maintain the credit rating that New Hampshire has right now. This slide also shows how this ratio has performed during the last few years. And as you can see, I guess going into beginning in 2018, 2019, the ratio was declining, and that was due to the revenue performance that we were having at that time. Clearly, that changed in 2020, and it will depend on how soon we control the pandemic to go back to pre-pandemic levels. Prior to 2017, there was this reclassification of the Medicaid enhancement tax revenues from unrestricted revenue to restricted revenue, and that's what drove the ratio higher. And the 2020 is a preliminary ratio. Again, I was just mentioning that we're in the process to confirm if that's going to be the ratio based on the revenues, the audited revenues that we have for fiscal year 20. And now we have to, the job is going to be to try to determine some assumptions of how the revenue is going to perform in the next few years. So we just typically prepare that, and that's what we feed into the methodology, and that's what we'll calculate the new ratio and to be able to include it in the new study. And then again, another point I want to make is some of the considerations. So we work really closely with the rating agencies. When we issue bonds, we work really closely with them to make sure we provide them with the information they need to better assess the state, the financial health of the state. And so we can, our goal will be to improve our credit rating But again, right now we do have good ratings, and that's what allows us to maintain lower costs for our general obligation bonds. And so again, the credit rating is what influences the the borrowing costs. The better our ratings are, obviously the cost will decrease. Our yields will be, our bonds will be more competitive, and we could obtain lower yields for our borrowing. Rating agencies focus, they focus on a variety of components. The balance on the rainy day fund. They focus on the structural budget and the flexibility that states have to control expenditures. They've been looking at the state's obligations, such as Medicaid, increases in Medicaid spending, pension and post-employment liabilities. All of that because they're concerned that that could create additional fiscal pressures for the state. So one way so there are so many components that are not, they're difficult to control, but there's the debt levels is something the state can control. And that is why, it's important to maintain that discipline if we want to continue having that, having that good positive or essentially those good points with the rating agencies. And again, this formula, the debt to revenue ratio, revenues are difficult to project, to estimate, especially with the current situation that we're living right now. But the debt levels is something that we can control, we can manage, and that perhaps will help us continue with the financial health that New Hampshire is known for. And the last point I want to make is it is important to maintain also borrowing capacity, and this is in the event of having unanticipated capital needs. For example, the Concord Steam project that happened a few years ago. The PFAS remediation project, additional $50 million was authorized last year. So the recommendations that we will provide to you will probably look about the same, and the committee will have to decide, and obviously the legislature will have to decide, the other matters that are important that perhaps knowing that there is additional borrowing capacity, perhaps that will help you determine what are the projects that you want to approve. And that is what I have today. Hopefully I didn't lose you as I was going. The last page of my presentation is, some of the resources that we have. I was also, Mr. Chair was mentioning that we have the official statements. We do have plenty of those books, physical books that we could share with you. But in the meantime, we have these books posted online. That is the link that will take you there on our website. And so we have the official statements and supplemental disclosures. We have the debt affordability studies for the last several years, and as well as the debt limit certification that we submit to the LBA. And we also have a treasury dashboard. My predecessor created a treasury dashboard, and that dashboard includes several metrics that we track in the treasury, in the event that you want to look at something quickly. And so that completes my presentation. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen so I can ask any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. It's informative. If you have questions, please raise your hand. But I would ask that you not ask the treasurer what the dollar amount is going to be for the coming capital budget. She's still refining that. She's still working with the governor's office on that. We will hear about that in a month from now or so when we get the capital budget and where she is and what she's refined. But just know that I wanted everybody to know how she developed the debt affordability study, where it came from. But right now she is in a process with the executive branch to come up with a recommendation to us. And that will all be included when the governor gives us his capital budget and what he thinks we should do and how much we could spend. Because whatever she gives us now is going to change in all probability. Representative Abbott. Unmute.
Yeah, I'm trying there. Yes, I just wondered that, I found it very helpful to have that dashboard. And I just wondered if, that could be provided to us so we could look at it, especially what the bond ratings were by Moody's.
Absolutely, and there right now that's being posted on a monthly basis. So if you would like, I could start emailing it to you, the committee. I will take any suggestions how you want to if you want to receive an email from me. I could do that.
I can't speak for the rest of the committee, but like I said, I found it most helpful.
Madam Treasurer, why don't you just send the link to it to the entire committee? And that way they can, if they want to save it, they can, because it does get updated and they can check on it periodically rather than you having to try to remember to send it out every month or so.
Thank you. And again, it's posted on the website. And I'll be happy to share this presentation as well, so you can,
that would be
keep it as a reference if you would like to look at it in the future.
That would be helpful.
And I'm very sorry I didn't ask Chief Deputy Treasurer if you wanted to add anything in addition to what I said.
Ms. Miller?
Okay.
Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Good morning. Okay, I unmuted. No, I have nothing meaningful to add. That was good. So
thank you.
Thank you. Representative Faulkner.
Yes, thank you. Last session, we learned that there was some dispute with the rating agencies over how they were treating New Hampshire. Is there still that disagreement, or have we resolved those issues?
Yeah, I believe one of the rating agencies, I'm not sure if we'll call it a dispute, but perhaps my understanding is one of the rating agencies in their description and characterization of how the state was performing, perhaps they were using old information. So we had a meeting with them in the beginning of the year, and we were able to explain to them, the way we were seeing their evaluations. And what that did is they revised the way they were assessing the state. At the time when, so it was helpful. I think it was a productive feedback that they received from us, from Treasury, from our predecessor especially. And when the state issued bonds in March of last year, this rating agency, S&P, upgraded the state. The outlook of the state changed from stable to positive. So I think it was very helpful to explain to them that perhaps they were seeing the way they were characterizing the state was not as accurate as it should have been. Unfortunately, the beginning of this, in the beginning of the pandemic, what that did is it allowed us to go back to stable. When the pandemic started, S&P changed their look of the entire public sector, including the state, and it had nothing to do with the performance of the state. It really had to do with how they were seeing the economy at that time and the difficulties that the pandemic was presenting, and how they were able to see that the states were going to have a challenge meeting revenue performance and all the variety of challenges that were evident to them at that time. We saw bonds just this past December. We did not get an upgrade, but the good news is that we kept our ratings. And so again, in my opinion, the way they see the state is very positive. There were many states that were, well, perhaps not many, but there were states that had grading challenges, and some of them were downgraded. So it was very positive to see that the state of New Hampshire maintained those ratings, and we were able to have, in addition to that, our bonds sold very competitively, and we obtained a very low yield. Of course, the market was performing. It's the way the market is performing. The reason why we also had low, obtained low yield. But again, it's important to recognize that the state is doing a terrific job with the finances, especially comparing to other states.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Ebel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. So I don't have the chart in front of me now, but we all believe, and you've said that New Hampshire does really well in its debt service ratio. And the thing is, what I saw there was that the Moody's average net debt service ratio was 3.8% versus ours being 6.4, 6.5. I saw the ratio to personal income for New Hampshire was much better, and also per capita. But if it's not too complicated, I mean, there's a big difference between 3.8 and 6 point whatever.
Yes, and that is a great question. And Moody's uses a different way to calculate their ratio. And I believe I was looking at the report yesterday, and I believe our ratio for Moody's is also 3.8%. What Moody's does is the reason the ratio is lower is because Moody's includes the education trust fund revenue as part of the overall formula. So the other rate, the typical ratio we calculate, we only use unrestricted revenue, but they include again the education fund revenue, because they believe it's also considered unrestricted revenue, even though it's used for education funding. But that is the reason why Moody's calculates the ratio in a different way for all the states, and it is 3.8% from the last report. It is 3.8% for New Hampshire. But again, the overall understanding and how the other rating agencies see, I guess a typical way to calculate their ratio is using only unrestricted revenue. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Going once? Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. It was informative and it was helpful. And I do appreciate you making the time with you and Ms. Miller to come over and talk with us today.
My pleasure, Mr. Chairman. And I can be reached anytime. I think I include, again, I'll share the presentation and information as there, but
yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. For those of you who hung in till the end, I appreciate you being here today. I know it's not quite the same trying to do it with this platform because you don't get the interaction that we normally would with both the treasurer and each other. But I wanted to get us started on the right foot, at least thinking about the capital budget, debt affordability, and just a little bit about getting to know each other. There not being anything. I just got I have an email from the speaker's office that there's a chairs and vice chairs meeting in the morning to talk about how we're going to go forward. So I will try to get as much information out to you as I can over the weekend. But as I said earlier, do not plan on anything until the week of the January 25th. So with that, I appreciate everything, and I appreciate everybody who has stepped up to work. Lapses, Marty. Now we'll talk about that later, but I do appreciate it, and I do appreciate the fact that all of you hung in here for almost 4 hours. It is going to be long days if we only get one day a week in the LOB. So let's work on it. Again, thank you. Anybody else have any final questions, comments? If not, Brad, thank you very much for playing host and setting this up. I do appreciate it. And I think all the members do as well.
Not a problem.
Yeah. And with that, we could shut it down. Thank you all.
Thanks, John.